Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 282. My name is NBZ, and I'm joined by Bally, as always. And Bally, it's been one of those things, you know, that a long time coming. I have been hosting a Nintendo podcast for over 10 years, and I've been working in video games for over 4 years now, and one of my bucket list goals, Bally, was to work on a video game that eventually crossed over into this Nintendo podcast to the point where Nintendo would present a video game that I had worked on to the general public. And so in this recent Nintendo Direct that happened, which was pretty fucking crazy. And we'll talk about it when we get further in. But I just thought that was it's a fun moment to be having hosted a Nintendo podcast for this long.
It's all finally come full circle. Mm-hmm. It's a huge achievement. It's awesome.
It's pretty fucking crazy.
Really, it's really
pretty fucking
one.
Crazy. We'll talk about that in the second segment of the show. But things have been a lot of things have been happening. I've been away.
Happy Astro Eve.
Yes, of course.
We're recording this the day before Astrobot comes out, and it has just received 95 on OpenCritic, and I think I'm maybe a little more excited than you, MBZ, because you're off to a wedding on the launch day, and I'm going to play all day tomorrow and the next day. And
well, as much as you can play in long stints, right?
As much as I can, given my life circumstances, but yes.
Yeah. They call him the Super Mario Killer, I believe. He's the one who's gonna murder Mario in cold blood. That's happening. I've been away in Amsterdam on holiday for a bit, and it's busy time as we said.
And Gamescom before that.
And Germany Gamescom, yeah. So it's we're trying to get all these episodes done as well as we can do. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do this goddamn episode about Nintendo and video games. And Bally, why don't you tell the fine folks at home what we're going to be talking about today?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. And then for the second segment, as you alluded to, MBZ, we're going to talk about the Indie Showcase / Nintendo Direct, because they, for the first time, we believe, mashed the two together.
They did, yep.
Which I think there's some good reasons why they did that, which we can get to. But yeah.
I'm sure we can discuss it. I, by the way, was not aware that they were going to do this. I just thought it was going to be an indie world because that's what we were doing. Nintendo, hey, they don't tell anybody anything, in case you're wondering. We'll get into that. But yes, we are going to talk about some video games that we've been playing. And Bally, I have a brand new release to discuss. Of course, the latest in the venerable, the honoured series, Famicom Detective Club, Emio the Smiling Man, the third Famicom Detective Club game. So, a bit of context for people. Back on the Famicom in the old days of yore, Yoshio Sakamoto, guy who is most well known for Metroid as a series, obviously worked with Mercury Steam on Metroid Dread and Fusion before that and all those video games, kind of like the father of the series. He also had another series he was involved in, which was called Famicom Detective Club, which was a visual novels, detective, mystery, point-and-click adventure type game, very narrative-driven back in those days, which, when you think of Nintendo, is not really the thing we think of, right, is narrative-focused stuff, but they were experimenting back then and doing games like that. And fast forward how many 25 years later, I think it was a couple years ago, they put out the remakes of Famicom Detective Club 1 and 2. And that was very, very cool. As a piece of Nintendo history. You
liked them quite a bit?
I enjoyed them, yeah, with caveats. And I think it's an interesting series because it's like they had been referenced and they've been Japan only, right? It wasn't a Fire Emblem thing where like they were put in Smash Brothers and then it came over. They were referenced in Smash Brothers. Ayumi Tachibana, I think, is the name of that character, because she's in this game as well. And there's a trophy of Ayumi in Smash Melee, basically. So it was referenced. I did know of it, but I didn't really know anything about it or what it was and how much it was tied to Nintendo and all that sort of stuff. So they remade them a couple of years ago. I enjoyed them. I think what they did really well was they visually were very stunning. Like, they were very pretty for visual novels. It feels like a lot of budget had been put into the art and making them stand out and kind of find this balance between 2D and 3D and very, very nicely drawn and well animated and voice acted as well. All voice acted in Japanese, but still voice acted. And I thought that was pretty impressive. Unfortunately, those games, I think, suffered from the fact that they kind of did the Link's Awakening. We always come back to Link's Awakening remake on Switch as a reference point here, because that game is the epitome of a visual makeover with zero mechanical changes, right? Like, it looks a lot prettier, but it's still, at the end of the day, the same bones of that video game. And I think the frustrating part of those two Famicom Detective Club games is they were still those old Famicom games at the end of the day, which means when you are talking to people, you have multiple options of talk/listen, or call/engage, or check a phone, or think, like options that back then made sense because you wanted to do specific things, but in a modern time for a modern visual novel, you just want to progress dialogue. And so it made it...
It's just a bit overly literal, isn't it? Just like...
Yes.
Breaks it apart into a tiny action.
Right. Breaks it into an action, which makes you unsure of what you should be clicking at any given time. It's like, should I engage this person? Should I listen to this person? Should I talk to this person? Like, because of that, it makes it so that you end up just clicking through options until you find the one that moves you forward in the story. And I think there's definitely more of a point and click frustration in those remakes, because they are, again, like, based on older design, and back then it was more normal for you to get hung up on this stuff and just click around and try and figure out what you had to do. And they didn't update that, and that was a little annoying, but I understood it, right? Because at the end of the day, these were remakes of old games, and so that's fundamentally what they were. So in comes Emio the Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club 3. And it is a continuation, narratively, in terms of you are still that same character. You name your character, so I just named them as myself. And when you start up Emio, it says, oh, we see you have save data. Do you want to import your character's name? I forgot that usually I go like Xenopus Rex or like NBZ or something. But for some reason with Famicom Detective Club, I just use my full real name. And so it kind of jump scared me when they're like, hey, do you want to import this full real name of yours? I was like, wait, how do you know that, Nintendo Switch? I didn't tell you that. But apparently I did.
The first jump scare of the game.
Exactly. First horror thing of the game. I wish we can kind of get into as well, because I don't think we've really talked about Nintendo's marketing around this and what they've been doing with it. But yeah, that actually happened when I was playing the demo, because obviously the demo was something they put out early before the full game released and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you play as that same character, and Ayumi is also your kind of not sidekick, but the two of you are kind of like young detectives in this agency, and Utsugi is like the head detective, but he's like that mentor figure who just never appears. Like he's basically gone the entirety of both of those games, and that doesn't change in the third game either. He's basically just absent the entire game, and it's up to you two to basically figure it out. It's almost like he's like, yeah, you guys should try and become detectives on your own, and isn't gonna like help you that much. Just kind of checks in every now and again. So yeah, the interesting thing with this game, I think, is it was first announced in a way that that made it stand out a lot more, because Nintendo released this weird video on YouTube, this teaser of this guy standing there with a weird paper bag.
It's like one of the most unusual, and like Nintendo do a lot of unusual things. I think it's like one of the most unusual things I think I've ever seen them do.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and like a lot of people were speculating, like, is this like a Bloober game they're working with Nintendo on or something, like a horror thing, new horror franchise? Like, it was creepy, and all they titled it Emio. Emio is the only thing that the name of that video was. It's kind of like a viral marketing moment for them, which I thought was very cool. And I also was like, well, I'm not going to be interested in this. This is a weird horror thing. Nintendo doing a horror thing, it's probably not for me. And then I feel like I'm probably the most minority on the internet where they revealed what it actually was, and I was like, oh, fuck yes, I'm in. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, it's a Famicom Detective Club game? Oh, I thought it was going to be an interesting horror thing. And meanwhile, me over here celebrating because it's a new visual novel in the series that I was very interested in. So yeah, it was an interesting thing because they got a lot of people's attention, and then I feel like they probably lost a lot of people's attention when they realized what it was. But at least people knew what it was, right? I think that was the smart thing about it, is word of mouth got out there about it. And I think this was a better way to do this than if they put it in a Nintendo Direct. Because if they just put it in their Summer Nintendo Direct with everything else, it would have got lost in the shuffle. No one would have talked about it, right? It would have been completely forgotten about, and it would have disappeared from memory. And I think there's a bit of a double-edged sword to the way they announce this, because on the one hand, yes, it is more people know what it is and can try it out. On the other hand, I think that their strategy with the demo may have backfired a little bit, in the sense that I think the demo offering, the first two chapters, are probably the worst part of this game, and also like are going to turn off a lot of people, because it opens up and you have this interesting premise, and then it gets into the actual gameplay stuff where you are talking to people, clicking through, and there are so many moments in these opening 2 chapters where your character, okay, so here's the best example. Your character is standing at this bus stop and their phone is out of battery, so they can't use their phone, and they're just standing there, and all you can do is like look around, but there's nothing to click on to look. You can click the listen, the call button, you can think, and so you are just standing in this field. There's no narrative progression happening, no character progression happening. You're just standing in this fucking field clicking on options, dialogue box, for I swear 10 to fucking 15 minutes. And like nothing is moving forward. Your character's going, oh, I wish I would have charged my phone and stuff like this. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, I think that this game, at this point in time where I'm at like chapter 8 or chapter 9. So I'm getting close-ish to the end.
How many hours is that?
I think I'm about 4 to 5 hours in. So I'm just probably 60% of the way through, past the halfway point. And it's at this point I'm like super invested. Like, it's great. The story's really good. It's hooked. It's grabbed me. But that only happened at chapter 4, and Nintendo's demo is chapter 1 through 3. So like you really don't get to the hook at all when it comes to the demo that they're putting out there, and they released it in this like episodic manner of like, oh, we're gonna update the demo and you come back next week for more. And it just wasn't, I feel like, for a casual audience who are going to be interested by the marketing of this game and trying to get pulled into it, there are 2 or 3 moments within this initial opening where I'm like, man, this just feels like you haven't progressed this game, this genre at all, right? There's been 20 years of visual novel progression since the original games came out, and Nintendo were like, oh no, we're just going to do the same thing. We had this model from the previous game because we did the remakes. We're just going to keep the same exact model here, and we're going to keep all these options the same. And it's quite frustrating in that way. Now, what I will say is that I don't think it is as confusing, or like you don't get very stuck in this compared to the remakes, because what the remakes did was it's more like Ace Attorney, where you can choose like, I'm going to travel to this location, I'm going to travel to this location and go to this location, and so you end up going to different locations, trying to click on options, trying to progress, and that wastes a lot more time. I remember there was a NintendoLife guide when the remakes came out that I kept going to again and again and again just to get through the game, because I was like, I don't know what the fuck to click on next. That hasn't happened to me at all in Emio. It's much more streamlined, it's much more linear, and it's much more, you are locked in this conversation with this person, there are limited options for you to choose, so you will get there eventually. It's just a case of clicking on them. But it's still the case of talk/listen, engage/call, think, and I'm clicking options. I don't know what there's no logic to it, really. Like, I guess if you really think about it, there's probably some kind of logic, but it's very much like I'll click a dialogue option, and you know how in other games it'll be like, you've ticked off, you've done that, you've ticked that dialogue option, you don't have to do that one again. This game doesn't do that, and so like you could keep clicking it again and again, and maybe there's a new dialogue thing there, but you don't know until you click it, and so you are endlessly clicking these dialogue options just to get progression of what's happening. And there's definitely a lot of conversations, like there was a chapter I did maybe a couple of days ago where you're in a car with another character, and this sequence is 20 minutes long, and you gain maybe 1 or 2 pieces of valuable information, and the rest of it is just like dialogue that feels unnecessary, or just like it's trying to build character but it's not doing a great job. Like there's not a lot of, it's not even exposition, it's just kind of like small talk that doesn't lead anywhere. And I'm like, there are certain sections of this game where I'm like, you have 20 minutes in this field waiting for this bus, or in this car talking to this man, and nothing is achieved narratively or character motivation wise or anything. Maybe there's a little snippet which will come back later, but like it feels there is a lot of wasted time in those early goings. And then like earlier today or yesterday, I think actually this morning, when I was playing this morning, there was a whole hour and a half section where I was fucking gripped. I was like, here's the reveals coming, here's the stuff, like there's a character that you wanted to talk to and you're finally able to talk to them, and you learn a lot of information, and it sets up this creepy thing that's going on, and you're like, oh my god, what's happening? There's dramatic music. The music, by the way, fantastic. Like, oh my god, they absolutely cooked on the soundtrack. Like the soundtrack for the remakes is really good, but they've done an excellent job of like modernizing it and bringing new themes in here that feel still very faithful to the original, but still doing their own thing. It just came together in a great way, and like I'm very much hooked on the story now, and I think narratively it's definitely the strongest of the 3 games. It has a really interesting, you know how you get me with a murder mystery, and you say, by the way, there was another set of murders that happened 18 years ago. Dun dun dun. Like it's the most obvious thing, and it happens in every Ace Attorney game. Every Ace Attorney game is like, this thing happened 25 years ago, but also it happened today, and I just love that. Like, it's the simultaneous solving something in the past but solving it in the future, and they're actually connected, and you don't know, like, was it the same killer from 25 years ago as today, you know? Like, that kind of shit I love. I think it is so interesting.
But you're saying like Phoenix Wright feels a bit leaner.
I feel Phoenix Wright gets to the point more quickly.
Gets to the meaty bit quicker.
But Phoenix Wright is also just like funny. Like the dialogue is funny, and so even if it is meandering and doing weird stuff, at least you're enjoying the writing, because the writing is so sharp and the localization is so good. And not to say this is
a bit over serious then, or
no, I wouldn't say that. I would just say that it's sometimes plain in its dialogue, and it's not necessarily. I don't know. It's not kind of getting me in that same way. So I think that like Phoenix Wright is more of a logical puzzle solving thing, in the sense that there are specific moments in Phoenix Wright where you are like pulling out evidence to contradict certain statements, right? Whereas in this, it's, you know, there is nothing that you can kind of get wrong or get right. It doesn't matter really. Like, even if you get something wrong, the game will just move on with it. And so I feel like at the end of the game, they're probably going to give me a score of like how your detective score or something of how well you did in terms of getting stuff correct. But I don't really care, because that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the narrative. I'm here for kind of like figuring out this mystery as it goes along. And so the game does have sections where it will be like type in a word. Like, okay, here's a wild thing I've never done in a Nintendo game before. One of the prompts was asked me to type in the word, and the word I had to type in was suicide. I had to type the word suicide on a keyboard on a Switch in a Nintendo game.
In a Nintendo game.
Yeah, as a thing like that was related to the case. And I was like, wow, this is pretty wild. And I've heard that the ending of this game goes some pretty dark places. Obviously, this game is rated 18 and deals with serious subject matters, murders. It's children being murdered, right? It's pretty dark stuff. But it hasn't felt like they've shown their hand fully with that yet, but I can see it happening. I can see it coming. A lot of people have said like the end of it definitely earns that 18 plus rating, which I'm very interested to see. But yeah, I think it's this kind of weird dichotomy where like, would I recommend this game? Yes and no. Like it is definitely a narratively, I like it, but you have to work to get there. Like you have to spend quite a lot of time in order to get to the point where you're fully hooked and fully bought in and want to know more. And there's still a little bit of slowness as you go along, figuring out like what to say to people, or like what option to click on people and that sort of thing. And yeah, it looks gorgeous. It sounds amazing. Like all the technical stuff is great. Like it looks great on the OLED. I've been playing it on the monitor as well, and yeah, I can't floor it presentationally. And voice acting is really good. It's all Japanese, like I said, but it's very well done. And like the mouth flapping on the animation works really nicely with it. There's so much to like here, but you have to work for it, and you are constrained in this little box. Like the way I describe it is, it's almost like, so back in the day, right, Bally, the very first Dragon Quest game on the NES. When you wanted to go downstairs, you had to bring up a menu. Instead of like, you know, in Pokemon, you walk over the stairs and you automatically like go down a floor or up a floor.
Right.
In Dragon Quest, you walk over the stairs, you have to open the menu and you have to press stairs and you use the stairs. There's an option specifically for stairs. If you want to talk to somebody, instead of pressing A on them contextually, you walk up next to someone, you open the menu and you press talk. And imagine if Dragon Quest XI had come out and that's how you had to interact with the world. That is what they've done with Famicom Detective Club 3 here, with Emio. It is taking mechanics from the 1980s and thinking they are still good for today, right? Like, I think the thing is it's interesting, right? Because and I don't think it's that frustrating as what that would be, right? Because that Dragon Quest thing, that would drive me fucking insane. I think that would be a nightmare. And this is not as bad as that because, you know, it's all menu driven, it's all talking driven, so you can get around it just fine. It just feels like it's out of place, and it feels like it doesn't make sense in a modern game. But because they had this framework from the remakes, I think they've just thought, well, you know, that worked. It's a classic Nintendo thing of, that kind of worked. Let's just do it again without really thinking about it. And it's very frustrating from that perspective, because I think they could do something really interesting. Like, if you want to lean into the detective side of stuff, you could make it very interesting with these options and make them contextual, but in a way that involves puzzle solving, as opposed to, I'm clicking observe here because that's the only option that I have that has not been clicked yet, and hopefully it works, right? So it's this fine line between, like, they want it to be detective-y, and so they want you to kind of click between options, but none of the options, like, there's no logic to why you should click that over this, you know? So yeah, I think there's a nice balance they could find with the new one, and I would like a new one to modernize that gameplay stuff, but I just don't see that happening. If this is what they decided to do for this, then it's kind of that Nintendo thing of, like, they're just going to continue to do this forever, and they're never going to change it. So yeah, it's a tricky one where, like, yes, I'm so glad they made a new one of these, and I am really enjoying it, but also, you know, they could have looked at the last 20 years of the entire genre and maybe learned a couple of things about it, and also just maybe taken feedback from how the remake was received and that sort of thing. But hey, I don't know. I think it's cool the way that they marketed it and the way people have been shown it. But like I said, I feel like a lot of people are gonna have bought this and be like, wait, what the hell? Like, what did I buy? So yeah. Emio, the Smiling Man, I'll probably finish it by next time, and hopefully the story ends well, and it has all that good stuff. Because yeah, it's definitely, I'm really interested, right? It's like, the setup, right, is that this, okay, I haven't even talked about, like, the concept of it, but basically the idea is that this man, Emio, he wears this paper bag on his head, the Smiling Man, and he killed 3 people 18 years ago, 3 girls, and all these girls were, like, between the ages of, like, 13 and 18, like teenage girls, and they were all crying, basically. And there's an urban myth associated with it, where basically he comes up to you, and if you're crying, he basically murders you and then puts a paper bag over your head that has a permanent smile, so that you'll smile forever. So it's very creepy. This game opens with a young boy who has got this paper bag over his head, and this hasn't happened for 18 years, basically. And so it opens up this whole can of worms of, like, is this the same killer from back then, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, lots of interesting things being explored, and dark stuff. It's giving me a little bit of vibes of Paranormal as well, slightly, that I played last year. And yeah, that game, that's a great example, actually. Paranormal is a great example of how to do a creepy, horror-y visual novel in a modern era, right? With some modern flourish and, like, progression and all that sort of stuff. And I think, yeah, they could have looked at that and learned quite a bit from it. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's not gotten super scary yet, and I don't know that it will ever do that, but the original the second game, The Girl Who Stands Behind, that was relatively creepy, and I find myself, like, it's not that I'm getting into horror or anything, Bally, but I think visual novels with a little bit of a creepy twist to them do work for me on that level, because it is tied up with, like, a murder mystery and a bit of supernatural and a bit of what's going on here, which I do think is...
You're making me want to play my game trade game, Danganronpa. Get to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Danganronpa ever gets horror-y, but it definitely has, like...
It's just a bit dark.
It has dark moments, definitely. I mean, the whole thing is teenagers killing each other, so of course it's going to be dark. But yeah, I mean, it's another great example. Like, Danganronpa is very Ace Attorney adjacent, and I think that game does a much better job, like, of...
Pacing-wise.
Pacing you through the stuff, right. Because, like, after that hour-and-a-half chunk this morning of, like, yeah, the shit is going off, then I had another, like, 30 minutes where I was like, okay, we're in a cafe talking to this guy again, and it kind of, like, went back to the pacing from before. So yeah, hopefully it fully picks up by the end and goes crazy. I'd very much like that. So yeah, do check it out if you're curious about it. Emio the Smiling Man. But yeah, to me so far this feels like something for the sickos by the sickos. So if you're not a sicko yet, maybe play some other visual novels before you get to this one. So all right, Bali, you have been playing another relatively new release as well.
Yeah. I've been playing SteamWorld Heist II, obviously a sequel to the first game, which came out in 2015, I looked up, and I actually played the first game earlier this year. Absolutely loved it. I think it was on sale for like $1.99, and I was like, I've got to get to the SteamWorld games. We both love the SteamWorld games. I loved Heist 1. For those who don't know, it's a 2D tactical base shooter. So think Worms, back in the day. It's
kind of like XCOM in 2D, side-scrolling XCOM.
XCOM in 2D. Yeah. And I think like the vibes and everything of the second, like, I'm really really enjoying the second game so far. I'm about 12 hours in, and I think the second game is considerably longer than the first. I think it's about 24, 25 hours. So I'm maybe,
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty beefy.
yeah, maybe a third to almost getting onto halfway ish. But I think the vibes of the game, like the first game, are very good. I think the sailing around the world, which is a change from the first game, the music feels like a huge step up from the first game. Like there's bars that you go to intermittently, and the music plays in the bars, like the first game. I just think that the music in this game for those little bar breaks feels more impactful. And honestly, the mechanics are identical to the first game, but they've essentially added lots of layers of mechanics. And I say that they don't overcomplicate the mechanics, but there's definitely more to get your head around. Like, I think if you're going into this game fresh, I still think the tutorials are done very well and it's understandable, but they've got like 6 difficulty settings, and the standard difficulty setting is called expert. So that's the one I'm currently on, and I'm finding is a very healthy challenge. So some of the things that they've added from the first game are stuff like the world map. So every time a character does a mission, they essentially can't do another mission until they've rested at a bar. And the idea of this is that it's trying to encourage you to grow your party and use multiple party members, because the idea is that you get points for completing missions, and those points only last a single day. So you essentially want to spend those points at the end of the day when you like go to sleep, before you have to sort of replenish your crew members. So say you've got a 6-party crew and you use 3 crewmates in order to do one mission, you'll get some points, and then without having to go to bed, you can go do another mission with the other 3 crewmates, make more points, trade in all those points before going to bed, and then you get extra points essentially, and then you refresh them for the next day. So it means the game, it's just a way of the game trying to push you to grow your party and to use different units essentially.
It's good for variety's sake. Really
good. Yeah, I think it's a good mechanic, honestly, because I definitely leaned more on like my top 3 guys last time. I'd always bring like my sniper, my heavy, this, that, and the other. Like I'd really lean on them. Whereas this game, I'm much more like, right, let's mix it up, let's try this, and I feel like the game's really rewarding me for mixing it up.
Do those points go into like a skill tree type of thing? Is that the idea?
So there's lots of different point systems. So those points are basically just a currency for the day. There's 3 currencies. You've got those green points that you spend at the end of days to get. You can spend them on other currencies or weapons or this, that, and the other. The main currency of the game, similar to the first game, is the steam. So the steam is or water, I should say. So the steam is how you pay for standard weapons or ship parts, accessories. You can even pay for pink gems, I believe, because the second currency are the pink gems. The pink gems are a bit more. You don't get many pink gems. They're more rare to come by than water, and the pink gems are spent on longer lasting permanent upgrades that are more akin to a skill tree. So
right, okay.
So you can unlock special abilities for each character. However, the main way to unlock special abilities for each character is to level them up, and the characters gain experience, and that is the main way of unlocking their so-called skill trees. Although it's more kind of like just a left to right skill tree.
Okay.
And then another thing that this game does, sorry, I'm throwing a lot of mechanics here, but another thing that this game does is the ability to swap classes. So I think if you compared it to a game like Octopath Traveler, there are essentially skills that characters can keep by gaining experience in different classes. So the class is dictated by the weapon you give a character. So, for example, a flanker, they have the ability that if you shoot an enemy in the back, you do +1 damage. So if you are, say, a heavyweight character, I think, or there's another character called like a boomer. So say you're a boomer and you're like, actually, playing as a boomer is good, but I really want that ability to get extra damage for shooting characters in the back. I know I'll play my boomer character as a flanker by giving them a shotgun, because the shotgun is the flanker's weapon. So you give them a shotgun, they become a flanker for that mission. And then you play the mission, you beat the mission, you'll gain experience as a flanker, and you level up the flanker skill tree essentially. And then there will be abilities, including the one that allows you to shoot characters in the back to do +1 damage. And you then have a selection of cogs you can spend. When I say spend, you allocate cogs. So you can like put cogs into one thing, take them out of another, and you can actually just play as a character that has got experience across all the different classes, building up all the abilities that you like and spending your cogs on the abilities you like to just make these really multi three-dimensional characters that can do a lot more than just one-dimensional sniper does long-range shooting, and that's that. So it's all done through the cog system, so you can get the abilities that you want.
Got you. So I guess there's a limit on like other abilities you can carry over from different classes. There's not a infinite upgrade every single character with every single class and have everyone have every ability. It's more like I want this character to have this one, so I'm going to spend a cog to
exactly
have that available.
The game is good where you will still be rewarded if you keep your boomer, for example, is only doing boomer things, because there's some abilities that only the boomer can do. And no matter what class you switch to, you cannot have that ability. There's a certain ability for, I'm trying to think of an example. So I think that like the sniper, you have to be a sniper to get the long range laser pointer thing. Like the distance of that pointer thing will be much shorter for any character that's not a sniper originally. Right. So there is like a reward system to like mixing it up. But I like that the game encourages you to mix things up, because also once you level up 1, 2, 3 levels as your original class, the leveling up system then really slows down. Like it takes a much longer time to get to level 4 and 5 and get some of those tougher levels to get to and get the better abilities. So it's in your interest to be like, hey, actually, let's try this guy as an engineer or a flanker or a boomer and all this. I think there's like 6 different classes, and I've now actually got 6 characters that represent the 6 classes. So I'm pretty happy with my team. And yeah, this all took me a little bit to get my head around, and I think they do a decent job of explaining like, look, there are some permanent skills and some that you have to assign cogs to, but it all does work. And I think that from a like combat perspective, it just adds a real nice layer of depth.
Is it similar to the first game in that levels feel kind of procedural in nature in terms of their setups, and like how big are these similar kind of sizes of like fighting, I don't know, 12 enemies and then clearing it out and then moving on?
Yeah, they're similar size. I'd say the longest levels I'd say are like, without restarting them, are probably like 10 to 15 minutes, and most of them are probably around 10 minutes, and even like the final bosses that I've fought so far are not that long, and that's great. I think that this game, one massive thing it's good at is the pacing. Like I'm loving the difference between the on-sea stuff and the skirmishes, and like setting up for a skirmish and doing the fight and then returning to the bar. Like I think the bar mechanic adds to the pacing of the game, where you have this downtime. Let's browse the shop. The game essentially forces you to browse the shop and look at these things, think, what can I do next? And you can talk to other robots, learn more about the lore of the world, and basically there's a whole like crisis of the water becoming polluted and they're not going to be able to use it for steam, and all the robots that you fight are diesel powered robots, they're not steam powered robots, so like they don't care about the water essentially going bad, and you're working out what the cause of the water going bad is, and there's like linked to some sort of, so I think there's like mythological stuff going on, but I don't want to spoil. But yeah, I'm in the second area, and I think that the pacing of the game is really good, because a big change from the first game, like I said, is the boat stuff. Now, the best way I can describe...
Yeah, tell me about this, because I've seen like footage of it, but it to me just looked like more of a world map than anything, or is there more going on with that entire area?
There are enemies and you have to defeat them, and I've not actually died yet, and I really don't want to know. So my assumption that if you die is that you lose all your coins for the day. That's what I would assume. You have to essentially restart the day. You don't get any of those benefits. So I think there is still a big penalty to dying at sea. Not that I've done it yet. I will say that there's barely any penalty for dying on the missions, which I think is great. You can even essentially, if you game over, you can like go back to the previous checkpoint and just like play things out differently, but you'll still be, even if but say you're down to like your last character, you'll still be you will still only have that last character. It's not like you get all your teammates back. So you might.
But they're like automatically checkpointing you mid-fight. Is that what's going on, or is it like you get to a certain point and it checkpoints?
It's hard to tell. I believe so, but it goes back to the last checkpoint if you get a game over. But like I said, you might have painted yourself into a corner where you cannot get out of that situation and you're going to die anyway. But if you just did like a mismove, or you think there's another tactical way of getting out of it, there's been a couple of times I've game overed and then gone back and sorted it, which is good. But yeah, the boat stuff. So like I said, if you die, I think you lose your daily points, which is quite a big deal. But the boat stuff essentially controls like Vampire Survivors.
Oh, wait, what?
You are doing nothing but moving, and you're waiting for your guns to shoot other enemy boats and submarines.
Oh, okay.
So I'm at the point in the second area you do gain the ability to submerge and also the ability to boost. So it's not strictly like Vampire Survivors in that you're just moving around, but at the start that's all you're doing. And you get guns on both sides of your boat. You can upgrade your armor, upgrade your guns, you can upgrade your torpedo, which works underwater because it's like you are in a submarine, it's not just a boat. And yeah, you're basically dancing around these boats, moving around them, waiting for your guns to recharge, and they take down the boats. And then when you take down boats, they will sometimes leave pink gems, but more often than not they'll leave water, and sometimes they leave nothing. But that's kind of like the busy play you're doing in between getting from point to point and missions. And the area I'm in, there's some really big ass boats that can really mess you up if you don't know what you're doing. So I think it's a...
Now when you say Vampire Survivors, is this more of a like mechanics wise how you control versus like a horde of things coming towards you? Is it more like fewer enemies that you're kind of dancing around versus like a horde?
Yeah, there's nowhere near the number of enemies of Vampire Survivors.
Right.
I mean predominantly the way that you control your character in Vampire Survivors, where you're not controlling the shooting, it's just on a timer. That's the biggest comparison I'd make to Vampire Survivors. You're just moving around these boats, and your guns are going off taking down these boats. And yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you're gaining water, do you want to spend it on boat upgrades to make sure you don't die, or do you want to spend it on the next big sniper rifle that you need to do better at the missions? And it's tough to know what to spend the money on. Generally, I focus more on the mission-focused stuff, and because I've not died yet at the boat, the sub stuff, I've not invested a ton in the boat stuff, but I can definitely feel the game pushing back more on like, yes, well, we are going to throw submarines and tougher boats and all these things at you, and you are now needing to get better.
Yeah, probably eventually going to be forced to invest in that stuff.
I'm being forced to. But that's a good thing about this game is you will naturally come across upgrades for everything that don't cost money that you just find in the world randomly, so you are rewarded for exploration, which is awesome. And I'm at this real, like, I enjoyed the first 6 hours. I had a very good time. I'm like, this is all very pleasant, this is very fun, this is a little bit tricky in parts, but I feel like all my characters, my team, my sub, the story, the pacing of the game, it's all really coming together in a very satisfying way. Like I said, I'm 12 hours in, and I'd say I've really kind of unlocked a handful of abilities and weapons in particular. Like my boomer character, who's called I think she's called Judy Wrench, and it's based on like Judy Dench. And she's got this, the boomer characters can either have rocket launchers or grenade launchers. So rocket launchers fire in a straight line and are very accurate, but the grenade launchers fire in like an arc, but are less accurate but more powerful. And I generally go for the less accurate but more powerful weapons in a game like this. And it's very, very satisfying, especially the area I'm in, where there are these enemies that are very weak, but they are very numerous. And having a grenade launcher that you can just lob in grenades that just takes out like 6 enemies at once is just incredibly satisfying. Like it's a very, very fun game to play. And I really love that the game is forcing me to try other characters and, you know, mix up weapons, because I really like the flanker. They've got the shotgun. They have great movement, and their whole idea is that you get behind characters, shoot them in the back. Then less powerful and better at close range, because obviously they use a shotgun. I also really like the engineer class. So they have, their gun can shoot 2 shots, so you can shoot 1 shot in one direction and then go and point at another enemy and shoot another shot at another enemy. Very satisfying. They also have like some healing abilities, which is incredibly useful to use, but their movement is very reduced. I obviously love the sniper. I love turtling. I love standing back. But at the same time, I really love my heavy, I can't remember what you call it. He's the physical combat guy, and I've really upgraded his axe to just do hella damage. So my point is that, like, I don't really have a favorite character. I'm really enjoying the diversity of characters more so than the first game, and I think the game's done really well at, like, saying, yeah, you could try this character, you know, and you'll be rewarded with more stuff if you use this character. And it's making me mix up my team a bit more and saying, oh, let me try that character as an engineer, or try that character as a flanker or whatever. And I think that's awesome. Like, I think that the extra level of currency, because I think the first game there was only one currency, whereas having these pink gems where you can unlock special one-off, like, incredible moves per character. I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm about to unlock all those. Like, it's very satisfying, because the first game didn't have that level of skill tree where I can spend like 10 pink gems and everyone in my whole team can now move one more square, for example. Like, and they call it's fun because they call it like you're investing in a gym on your submarine, because everyone's now at the gym, they can all now run further. Like, that's the joke. So, like, there's stuff like that where I just think this game, they've thought about mechanically, how can we make this game stronger? And I think they've done a great job. It's very fun so far.
Do you see yourself burning out over the next 12 hours? Like, do you see the runway of, because you're basically halfway through according to what other people have said about this game, do you think there is going to be enough kind of interesting stuff coming in terms of changing your characters and classes and upgrading and different ways to approach combat situations to sustain another 12 hours? Or do you think you're kind of like getting to a point where it might start getting stale the longer it goes on? Because I've heard some people say that maybe it feels like it could have ended a bit sooner, but I'd be interested to hear how you're feeling at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first game was about 16 hours, and I think that was the ideal length of this type of game. However, I think the nature of the downtime in this game, I'd actually be convinced that this game has the same number of battles as the first game, but is just 10 hours longer. And I think that extra 10 hours is spent doing ship combat, upgrading your ship, and also fiddling around with classes and exploration. And because of the ship combat, that's one thing. You've then got the exploration you can do with the ship. You've then got all these different other classes and different weapons to assign to characters that is a bit more in depth in the first game. So that takes time before matches. And then, like I said, you've got to return to the bar. So I think that when you add all those things together, I think they make the game overall much longer. I definitely agree with that. But I think they add... it's kind of going against your logic, MBZ. They're making the game longer, but they're making the game better paced at the same time.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense though, right? Because I think there's a way in which certain loops can be paced in games, which we'll get onto in a bit.
I think if you threw the mechanics of the battles of the second game into the first game and reduced the exploration, it would just be too intense. I enjoyed playing this game for like an hour and a half. I don't think I'd be able to play more than 20 minutes, half an hour, if I was just going battle to battle to battle. Like, I quite like the gradual,
the way they break it up
nature.
Definitely helps.
Yeah, they break it up nicely. Yeah. I'm always a fan of breaking up complicated stuff in games, and this game does a good job of that.
When you say exploration in the sea stuff, is that you just like going to islands and like finding things? Are you ever getting off the boat and walking around a space ever, or is it okay?
It's fairly rudimentary so far, at least, but yeah, you can discover islands or other places, and then you like essentially... It's a very simple, like, more often than not, it's like a little loop, and you just walk around it and you find like a couple of chests and a character to speak to, and that's that, and you kind of move on to the next one. It's worth doing because it's essentially free stuff, and you should always try and take the free stuff. In the area I'm in now, where there's the diving ability, there are like some secret kind of tunnels and things that you can discover from going down under, and it kind of, the whole dive mechanic feels a little bit like Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, where you're kind of doing the dive down and then it unveils tunnels and then you kind of come up again, but it's all timer based, and like you need to make sure you've got the air to do it and that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's very rudimentary exploration, but like I said, I think it adds a nice layer to the kind of pacing of the game, and I like it. It's good. I think this game is very strong overall.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I definitely have an interest in it, and I think what you described there makes me a little less hesitant about the length that I've seen, because I did look at that and I was like, oh boy, that seems quite long for a game like this. But I think with the context of it's broken up into these segments, it feels like that time would go by a lot quicker when you're actually playing it, you know?
Yeah, I definitely remember with the first game earlier this year, just going one mission into the next, and that kind of downtime at the bar and the shop felt a lot shorter because you're not getting the boat there and doing all that kind of stuff. And I think they've had a real good think about, like, can we get away with doing a 25-hour game? And so far, like I said, I'm only 12 hours in. I think they can. I would guess, I'm in the second area, I would guess that there's going to be 3 areas. There were 3 areas of the last game. Maybe there's 4. I don't know. I've heard some cool stuff happens, but I don't want to spoil anything. And so far the story is good. Like, I think all the SteamWorld stories are generally like fine. I think this one is on the better side of SteamWorld stories. Not that any of them are that memorable, but I will say that the writing is pretty good. But I do think the music is a bit of a secret highlight, especially in those bar areas. They've clearly got with this band. I don't know who they are, but they've got this band to record, I don't know, 8 to 10 tracks of just this really original, nice, chill, I don't know even is it country music? I wouldn't know how to describe it, but it's kind of country folksy kind of music, and it works well with the vibe of what SteamWorld goes for, and I like it a lot. It's very nice.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely on my list to check out at some point, maybe this year, maybe not. A lot of stuff, a lot of video games. So I would like to. Having played most of the other SteamWorld games, I think it'd be good to play this one as well. So yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, yeah, I have a couple more things to chat about. One of them I'll just check in with because I finished it. So obviously, Bally, you talked glowingly about Dave the Diver a few episodes ago, and I had been playing it as well, but I was only about halfway through. I've now finished Dave the Diver, about 20-ish hours. So I played the back half of it. I definitely enjoyed it still, the back half of it. I did feel like it became a different game. Like I was kind of speculating about, in the sense that first half feels like you really get into the loop of fishing and diving and restaurant building. The second half does a lot of different stuff, right? Like, you open up this farm and you are doing stuff over there. There's a fish farm. I never really understood how the fish farm worked, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I went there and stuff was happening, but I didn't know what I had to do or what I was meant to do. You
just basically make them multiply and then send them to the kitchen.
Right. I never really figured that out in terms of sending them to the kitchen, I guess. Like, I just kind of looked at them. I was
you
like,
can
there's
send
lots of them.
Heaps and heaps of tuna and Otoro to the kitchen, and then just make tons of money. But
yeah, I guess that was the thing, is like, by the end, I didn't feel a need to do any of that, right? They open up this fish farming thing so you can make more money. They open up the regular farming so you can make rice and all these other dishes and stuff. And I think because the game switches its priorities to be much more linear narrative, scripted sequences focused, it felt like
that often doesn't require money. It's all kind of just its own thing.
It's going to happen anyway, right? So it's going to happen as you progress the story. And so all of a sudden I was like, well, I don't need to do any of this stuff. And so it led to me not engaging with any of the fishing stuff, not engaging with the fish farming and the regular farm, because I just, like, I didn't have a need to, because I was just progressing on with the story. And yeah, they have like stealth sequences in there. They have action sequences where you're dodging away from stuff and like clicking the stick to move out the way and dash and things like that. And I think that's probably where the game is at its weakest, unfortunately, is those sections where they try and make it into an action game, but the mechanics haven't been built for that. I totally understand like why they have ended up putting a dodge button on clicking a stick, because that's how it is built into the regular game of Dave swimming. But when you're trying to do a tight action sequence and dodge out the way of a boss as it's attacking you, it feels a little unnatural to do that as opposed to just pressing a button. So there's a few weird choices in there towards the end where you're doing an escape sequence and you're dodging out the way of things, and it feels a bit clunky, I think. And that's the same with the stealth. Like, it tries variety, but none of that variety like, it's not like Mario Party minigame levels of that sort of stuff. Like, it's still possible and serviceable, but yeah, it's just not up to the polished level, I think, of the core of the game, which is the fish catching and the exploration underwater and the strong loop that provides. So I think that's probably why it took me a little bit longer to finish it, is I was less motivated going through that back half, just because it became like, 1 second it's a Zelda game, 1 second it's like doing Eastward co-op stuff where you're playing as two characters, like doing almost like a side-scrolling dungeon, which was fun, but also, like, I don't know, I felt like I would enjoy that in a different game as opposed to what this one was and how it set things up. So I still really enjoyed it. I think it's a really well made thing, and has, like, I did the Godzilla stuff, so the Godzilla DLC, if you play the game just all the way through having that stuff installed, then it comes up as part of the story, and so the Godzilla stuff is very interesting from like they just fit this thing in here in the middle. And
how do you access it? I never did it.
I think it's probably because did you download that when you had, because you have to go to the PlayStation Store and get the free DLC to add it to your account.
So. Yeah.
So you probably didn't do that. You probably didn't go in. You have to go and navigate to the store, download the DLC, and make sure it's added, because you get a little icon on your save file. If you didn't see like a little Godzilla icon, you wouldn't have had access to it.
So worth doing.
I think there's parts of it that are really cool. Again, like, it leans more into the action side of things. There's a big chase sequence and a boss sequence, basically. Like, the bosses and chase sequences, I think early on I found them quite novel. By the end, they do them quite a lot, and I found them a little more frustrating than fun. But yeah, that one has a good spectacle to it, at least. Like, the way that Godzilla like comes out of the water and stuff, I think is very cool. And then like you have like a giant boss battle where you play as Godzilla against like a giant lobster and stuff. Like, it's got some cool spectacle to it, and yeah, I think their crossovers have been very cool, and we can talk about that again after the break. But yeah, I very much enjoyed playing Dave the Diver. It's a cool, very, very interesting game that it's kind of unlike anything I've ever played, if I'm honest. Right, it has
definitely
parts of that like Stardew loop of like finding things, selling things, that the day by day kind of like accumulation, mixed with like a more linear narrative adventure game almost, right? So it's a unique blend.
Definitely agree that like the first half of the game, when it's rolling everything out, feels stronger than like the second half or the ending of the game, where yes, I really like the narrative. I like that I just have a solid structure on top of just the open idea of you can do anything almost. I like that there's that structure, but I agree that kind of there's aspects that fall a little bit flat, and for a game that is so focused on fishing and making money and then all these things, you don't actually need any money to complete the game and finish the narrative as it unfolds, and that makes you feel it made me feel a little bit flat at the end, but not in like a really bad way, just in like oh okay, right, well, that's that.
Exactly. So yeah, I did really enjoy my time with it, and I think it's a very cool video game.
From one farm to another.
Let's talk about a loop that has me by the fucking balls. Okay, so all right. So, Fields of Mistria came out on Steam in early access. It's a game I've been following for quite a while, mainly because I admire their Steam page. I think they have an amazing Steam page. Like, some of the stuff that they did, I stole for like unbeatable stuff. I was like, oh, this is too cool. I've got to do this. Like, they have their wish list banner is like their character, and the character is like animated, like saying it with a speech bubble, and then you click show more on the Steam page, and it shows like the full character model. Very cool trick. Very, very cool stuff. They obviously were very smart about the way they put that stuff together. So what is Fields of Mistria? Have you heard of a video game called Harvest Moon? Little known franchise. It's one of those. It's basically like, I think a lot of people are comparing to Stardew Valley, because at this point in time, Stardew Valley is more popular than Harvest Moon, I think, which is a weird place to be. But I think like that's the case with a couple of indie games where like Undertale and its fandom is like 100 times the size of Earthbound, and I think Stardew Valley is kind of getting close to that in terms of eclipsing Harvest Moon, right? Harvest Moon is something that we grew up with. We played, GameCube games of Harvest Moon and GBA and all that sort of stuff, and we're very into the farming genre. And then Stardew Valley came out, and we got very deep into that, but it turns out a lot more people got much more deep into that when that happened. And so Fields of Mistria is, a game in the vein of a Stardew Valley or a Harvest Moon, where you are this character who moves to this town, but this time it's more, I would say, magical in a sense. There are elements of witchcraft and magic and like fantasy to this that I think are cool and also kind of play into the game mechanics. And I think the most striking thing about it is its art. It is, from a kind of top-down 2D perspective, like very similar to what Stardew looks like. In some ways, a little simpler in terms of character, kind of like sprites on the overworld. But the artwork for the characters, I would say, is kind of on another level. It is essentially like a 90s anime aesthetic. And all these characters look fantastic. And I think that's a lot of the appeal for a lot of the audience here, are like, oh my goodness, look at these hot anime characters, I want to romance them all, right? And that's part of the Stardew Harvest Moon loop, is who are the bachelors and bachelorettes that you are going to romance as part of this game. And this very much has that as well. I'd say, in a way, it leans into that more so than some other farming games I've played, where there's so much dialogue, there are so many characters, and they always have something new and different to say, and it's always contextual as well to like something you've done or something that's happening in the town at the time, or all that sort of stuff. There's lots of events going on. There's always a marker on Saturday when you go into town. There's a bunch of characters that you can talk to, and I think it does a very good job of creating like distinct personalities between them, and making you want to like go in one direction and talk to this person, or like do a quest for somebody else. Like, I think that is kind of the heart of it, and it's done very well. But I think what it does more so than any other farming sim is streamlines a lot of stuff. So, for example, you, in a lot of other games, when you go to like a crafting bench or a cooking table or whatever, you need to have the item that you're going to use in your inventory if you want to use it. No, not in Fields of Mistria. You can just pull whatever you have in a chest, and you can use that in cooking. So if you're in the middle of town and you're like, oh god, I needed 4 cabbages, but they're not in your inventory, doesn't matter. If they're in your chest, they count as something you can use in crafting, which is very, very nice. I think it's super streamlined, and it means that you're not wasting time like running back and forth to get stuff. Obviously, you can eventually make your own crafting bench and make your own cooking spot and all that sort of stuff. But this like makes it a lot easier, especially in the early goings when you're like, takes a while to get in and out of town, and you want to make sure that you're not wasting too much time. It's very good for that. I've definitely found myself cooking more in this game than I ever did in Stardew, just from the sheer monetary value that cooking brings you.
Just to sell what you've cooked.
Yes, exactly. But also, like, you get benefits for selling certain things. So it's interesting, because usually what I do now is when I have a new crop, right? So now it's summer. I've just started summer. I'm like 6 days into summer, and I just today plucked a bunch of cucumbers and tomatoes. So what I'll do is, there's the museum. So of course you donate those to the museum. So you keep one to donate to the museum. There is the sales bin where you just dump stuff in at the end of the day to sell the next day. So I usually dump one of each into those, and then I kind of save them, I hoard them up to wait until I get a good recipe that I can use to maximize the value of them. And some of the earlier crops you can do much easier recipes with. Some of the later ones you're gonna have to wait and get a few more ingredients to get them to a higher value. But every time you sell a regular, just like a tomato or a cucumber, there's a benefit to that, where the next day you'll get a letter from somebody who's like, oh my goodness, thanks so much for putting this into the community kitty or whatever. I got inspired by your cucumber. Here's a recipe for a cucumber salad. And you're like, oh, that's great. So like, you're encouraged to sell raw ingredients still, because you get a benefit for doing that. You get a new recipe, which will then feed into you getting more of these, and then obviously turning them into full dishes. And obviously dishes can be used as either to be sold for more money, or you can give them to people as gifts, right? Gifts is a very core part of like romancing, or just getting your heart level up with characters, where you're like, you have to figure out what everybody likes. Like, does this person in town like stones and bugs and like wood and just very boring things versus this person who loves flowers versus this person who likes fish, right? Like there are certain categories, and it is one of those things where, you know, a lot of the time with farming games, I go on a wiki and I'm like, half the game of playing Stardew was having a wiki open at the same time, which is great. But I think one of the cool things about this game is that if you have given somebody something they like, it shows it to you in the inventory or on the character screen. So if you go to the character screen and it has a list of like, here are the items they love, here are the items they like, and all of them are question marked out. But as you give people more stuff and as they like them, it will appear. So now awesome. I know that like Celine, for example, she loves flowers. Any flowers you give, she likes any flowers, but there are specific flowers she likes more than others. And so the ones that, you know, you find during the autumn, they're not going to appear during the summer. So if you want to keep those and she loves those, like hoard a bunch of those, keep them in your chest, and you'll have a supply of them to give to her as you go through the months where they're not available, that sort of thing. So it's a very cool system. Like I said, like streamlining stuff very, very well. And there's this whole element of, I feel like there's less of a focus on the pure farming. I feel like by month 2 in Stardew Valley, I had a much bigger set of crops and I had sprinklers and all that stuff rolling by that point in time, right? And it feels like stuff takes much longer to grow. Like cabbages take 9 days, which is basically a third of a month, which is kind of crazy. And because of that, there's a lot more focus on kind of building your character up through like a perk system. So every time that you do an activity that is either fishing or bug catching or farming or doing things with animals, there is a chance for this kind of shiny purple currency to drop. And this currency is this thing that you get and you accumulate, and you can talk to this dragon statue that's on your farm. This is where the fantasy element comes in. There's basically like a prince and princess of the town as well, and a whole, like, there's like a witch and things like that. So it's all kind of
merging the farm with like fantasy RPG. That's
yeah.
where it's at.
Yeah, totally. So but it's not like overt. It's still kind of subtle in terms of the fantasy stuff. It still very much looks like a Stardew town, and it's much bigger. Generally, the space is much larger. Like, I'm kind of crying out for a horse at this point in time. I don't even know if there's a horse in it in early access. Maybe I have to wait until the next update to get a horse. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get this. This space is much bigger than the town in Stardew in terms of the areas you go to.
Is there a run button?
There's no run button. I don't
no
know.
run.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit of time to get around, and you know your energy is something that you need to keep track of course, your stamina. But this dragon statue that's in your farm area, you talk to it and you can basically put points into different aspects of your character depending on like fishing stuff or mining stuff. So for example, if you basically at the end of the day you have stamina, and if you go to bed your stamina fully refreshes the next day, right? There's a perk that you can get early on which says if you go to bed with 0 stamina, you'll wake up with a little extra boost the next day. And so if you invest in that, you get that, then you're encouraged every day to maximize your stamina, use all of it before you go to bed, and then you'll wake up with even more the next day.
Is there a danger of collapsing before you get back to your bed?
So the only danger is 2 a.m. If it gets to 2 a.m., you automatically get sent back to your bed. There's no penalty for dropping items or anything, but you wake up super late. So instead of waking up at 6 a.m., you wake up at like 11 a.m. So you lose like a bunch of hours of the next day, essentially. And time is money, as we know in these games. So like that's a bit of a penalty. And there's definitely times where I've been in the mines, like mining away, and it's like, oh shit, it's 2 a.m. And I just like fall over and wake up late the next day. So there's definitely a danger of that. You get very hooked into this stuff, and you know I've played 12 hours of this already, and I only played it for like 3 days total because I've been away and other stuff. So I've put a lot of time into it without.
I'll have to bring that to the wedding with you if you can.
I think so. Yeah.
I have 2 key questions.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
First question: what is the fishing mechanic like?
It's Animal Crossing. So it's not Stardew Valley. Okay. It is exactly Animal Crossing, which is you throw your line. Actually, it does this little dotted line thing. So it goes dot, 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 dot. So it basically shows you the length.
Do you prefer it to Stardew Valley or?
I really liked the fishing in Stardew Valley. It was definitely...
I did too. I think it's snappier than Animal Crossing.
It was more involved, that's for sure. You definitely had to pay more attention, and it could get frustrating with the harder fish. I think this one is a lot easier and cleaner. I like it. I like Animal Crossing fishing. It's very simple, but it just does the job. It works. So for the purposes of just being like, I just want to catch some fish and sell them, essentially, I think it works fine for that. But yeah, I think that there's so many things to do already in this game.
My other question was, what are the range of animals like, and what do you have so far?
So I don't have any so far.
Okay.
I'm
Slow build.
Yeah, like 12 hours in, I've just got my barn today. I haven't built it yet.
And is that going to be for pigs, cows, or sheep?
I guess so. I'm not sure what the range is and what stuff I get. I imagine it will be all of the above.
I don't think there's going to be any fantasy creatures. You get like a unicorn.
Oh, that's a good question. Holy shit, I didn't even think about that. Maybe dragons?
It might be fun not to look it up and then just find it.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I wonder if you can breed dragons and unicorns and shit. That would be awesome.
Are you going to play this until... Is there an aim of where to get to? So I think in Stardew there was like that 3-year thing.
Yeah.
Is there an aim of where you want to get to? And are you going to do it all again when 1.0 comes? Do you have a plan?
Well, yeah, I think I'll probably play at least a full year to get that kind of view of it. At the moment, I know that it's capped in terms of relationship stuff. So... relationships go up to 10 hearts, and you can only go up to 4 hearts right now, I believe.
Okay.
So it's pretty hard capped on that
so you
stuff.
can't actually marry them yet.
No, there's none of that stuff in there, which I imagine will come.
For a game that's so horny, that's a real cap to put on.
I know, yeah, absolutely. Okay, talking about the fucking horniness of it. So I realized this, that when it changes seasons, all of the character portraits change. So when it goes from spring...
they get out the swimwear.
When it goes from spring to summer, I went down to the beach and I was like, oh wow, everyone's just in bikinis now on the beach. So it's also context sensitive. So like when they're on the beach, they actually have a different outfit from their summer outfit in town. So it goes even above and beyond that. Like it goes really, really crazy with it.
And it's like they go hard on the pixel art, don't they? It's that almost... I compare it to, I don't know, a game that does it, maybe like the modern Fire Emblems on like the 3DS, where
that's definitely...
you've got the pixel in the world, but then when they're talking to you, a 2D, not sprite,
character portrait,
but like character design comes up on the screen with a text box, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And like, I think GBA Fire Emblem is actually a really good touch point here in terms of the character designs. Like, they're definitely the 90s anime aesthetic, but
a lot of green hair, a lot of purple hair,
a lot of that, a lot of things like that going on. And yeah, I think it just looks really good. It's just very, very, the art is just tremendously good. That as well as the music. The music is just earwormy, hooky, like you'll just be humming along to it.
I am so... I don't think I'm going to get this early access, but I'm so going to jump in on 1.0.
Yeah, man. It feels like... Now, it is, it's very similar to Stardew in a lot of ways in terms of you go down to the mines and you mine stuff, and that's okay, but I do think that it is bringing new things to the table in terms of a bit more focus on the characters, a bit more streamlining of how these things work. And
I like the slow pace sound of the farm because...
Yes.
Stardew is great. I love it. I think it's pretty intense on the farming, and like you said, from quite an early point. Like I found myself there's a lot of busy work, and I think back to a game like Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life that I think is a lot more character focused, where yes, you have your farm, but I feel like you can do the farm stuff quite quickly, especially early on in the game when you have like 1 cow and can have like 6 crops. It sounds like you said, you've not got any animals yet. Like I think that pacing really appeals to me with these games, where I want that slow burn.
Yeah, it definitely has that. If you're concerned about like the running around and stuff to do, that's not resolved here, because that is 100% what this game is still. Like you will have a million jobs in your head of like, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. But I fucking love that. Like I think that's the thing that's fun. That's what keeps you going with these games. Is like, man, like I think the nice thing about this is it rewards you for everything you do in terms of every day. If you do something significant progression wise, it will basically level up your town. Your town has a level, and at the end of each day an experience bar goes up on the town, and you start out and the town is like stone, and then you get to copper and then silver, whatever. It keeps going up the ranks until you probably get a platinum, gold, diamond town or whatever, right? And currently I'm like level 24 with my town. And so anytime I donate something to the museum, or if I do a quest for a villager or something like that, you get experience leveled up on your town, and every time you level up, you get a reward in the center of town from like this big chest, and that chest reward could be like a new piece of furniture or a bunch of money or whatever. And so everything you do feeds back into each other. I think it's really well designed in that way. And like also every day you go to the town square and there's this quest board of things that people want. It's like, I need one of these things, or can you come over here and do a quest for me? And like there's always something in the back of your mind of like, okay, well, I'm going to bed, but I've got this thing in my inventory and I need to go to the museum the next day to do it. But while I'm on my way to the museum, I'm going to talk to this person and get a quest from them. And then on my way, I'm going to pick up this other bug, and that bug needs to go to this person. Like, and it starts fucking just rolling downhill. And all of a sudden, you are trying to do 17 different things in a single day, and you're not going to do them. And so you're going to carry them over, and it's that mental load of just being like, do this, tick it off. And it's very satisfying, and it's very hard to put down in that way as well. It has a very similar loop, but the loop is really perfected here. Like, I think they've really done a great job of understanding that and what makes it tick. And I think this is a thing that you won't be super interested in, but there's a lot of like character cosmetics of like, you get rewards for doing those quests or for, you know, leveling up your town. And sometimes it's like, oh, now your character can wear this cool new hat, or like now you have a full farming suit. And like, I wasn't that interested in that stuff to begin with, and then I started like customizing my character, and I was like, oh yeah, now I have like a headband and I kind of look like a ninja. Like, there's some fun stuff you can do with customizing your character, but also like, I feel like there's a heavy emphasis on customizing your farm and making it look the way that you want it to, but also you're resource constrained quite early on. And so I'm looking forward to the point where I have done a lot of the upgrading of my farm, getting my barns and my animals, and spending my money on the things like the nuts and bolts mechanic stuff, and then I can get into the fun of like visually customizing it. Like, once I'm over that hill of the mechanic stuff, then that's where like the visual customization comes in, and making your farm look cool and having stuff on it. I think that's something I'm looking forward to doing. So even if I get to a point of like running out of content to do in the game, there's still that character chase of like, oh, I want to customize this and paint it a different color and all that sort of stuff. I think it's really, really well done so far. And yeah, has a bit of RPG hooks into it. Has better feeling combat, I think, as well. Like, just swinging the sword feels better. And there's a lot more focus on, you know, just talking to people, quest giving, like narrative events. It feels more narratively driven than Stardew as well, cool. In a fun way, where there is kind of like basically you get when you first arrive at the town, there's just been this massive earthquake and it's kind of destroyed a bunch of the town. And so the quest as it goes, the main quest is like, you know, fix this thing, rebuild this right now. I think it's the windmill. Maybe I fixed the windmill. No, I fixed the windmill. Whatever the next thing is.
And does it have that main quest line like Dave the Diver?
Not in the same way, I think, because where Dave kind of like changes everything, all this is built into what you're going to be doing anyway, right? So the main quest is like a bit of story to be like, next up, we're going to build this bridge over to the river. In order to progress that, you need to have stone and wood and copper. And how do you do those things? By doing everything you're doing already, which is clearing out your farm.
So you don't think there's like an end game something?
I'm sure there is some narrative thing, but I think it's always going to tie into the fundamental loop that you're always doing. Yeah, exactly.
I see what you're saying,
yeah. So like, you're always going to be getting those resources. You're always needing more wood, more stone to build things. But like, for the big major progression, you need a bunch of money and you need a bunch of those resources. And then at the moment, I haven't got any iron stuff yet. I've just got copper tools. So I've got copper ingots that I get from the mine. But the further I get down the mine, then I'm going to start finding iron ingots and iron ore, and then I can use that to smelt it into better equipment. But then I also need to use that iron in order to progress the main quest. Basically, it's basically a progression blocker to be like, okay, you need to get to this point in the mines to get this resource, and then we'll let you move on to the next part of the narrative, basically. So it works in tandem with everything you're doing. You're slowly getting better and better. You know, now I have a watering can that can water 3 plants in a row instead of just 1, and that means my stamina is not taking as much of a hit. Oh, magic spells, that's another really cool thing. So you get a magic spell at the beginning that basically uses this mana circle that refills back over time, but basically if you run out of stamina and you're low on health and it's still like the middle of the day, you can pop this magic spell and it gives you all your health and your mana back, or stamina back. So you can pop that once every couple of days because it takes like a few days to restore the mana back to full. Another one of the abilities is a rain ability where you use it and it automatically waters all your plants for the day. So like you can use these mana circles as they refill to do different magic spells. And I'm sure there's more that I'm going to unlock as I go along. But yeah, they're just like really like the perk system. They're really helpful benefits that just make everything better. And easier and more streamlined, and I think that's such a good way of doing progression. It's like taking these magical elements to improve the quality of life of the game as you get further into it, which I think is just very, very smart overall. So
nice. So 12 hours in, is this how you felt 12 hours into Stardew? It's hard to compare because you're playing this after Stardew.
Definitely.
Pretty hot so far.
I think it's on par with it, just in terms of
which
like...
is still very, very good because Stardew's par is so high, of course. But
I think obviously like the comparisons are inevitable, and like at the end of the day, is it really doing that much different? No, but I think it is hard to do what Stardew does that well. And I think there have been many farming games. I've seen so many of them on Steam, and a lot of them don't really get it in the full way. And I think the thing that this one gets right is that it knows how to pace things out, and it knows exactly how to just tickle your brain to be like, this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, and like you have that mental checklist that you really want to do, and it's satisfying to do it, and just the moment to moment feels good. Oh, there's a jump button in this game, I should have said. Like you can jump over fences. Like there's a tactility. You can jump into the water instead of going round and having to cross a bridge to cross a body of water. Jump into the water and jump off the other side. Like it's really cool.
You also bloody love a jump button.
I fucking love it, yeah. Because it feels more tactile, right? The world is more interactable, and like with this game, getting around, like I said, is quite slow because I don't have a fucking horse yet, and the world's quite big. So like, if I just jump in the pond and swim over the other side, I can kind of cut my route and kind of speed my way to places I need to be. So yeah, I think that kind of tangibility of the world is super nice. The one thing I will say, upgrade your inventory as soon as possible, and I also don't think the inventory is big enough. I think one of the frustrations is you have to use your toolbar for all the different, your hoe and your axe and your fishing pole and your watering can. I wish that they had that separated from inventory. I think it's a problem with Stardew as well, but I feel like in these games these days, an inventory is very limited, and you have to keep running back and forth between places to store stuff, and I don't know. I wish it was its separate bar. I wish it was like, here's your toolbar for all your tools, and then your inventory.
Sort that in the modern one.
I think it does. I think
separate. From
new
items.
Animal Crossing does keep it separate, which was a good move, and I think every game should do that. Because this game's in early access, they're listening to community feedback and they're listening to what people are saying.
Shout, yeah.
I hope that they change that, because at the moment, like, you know, I have very limited space in my inventory, and so it feels like very early in the day I'll fill up my space with different fish and different bugs and stuff, and I'll be like, okay. One of the things I would love them to add is being able to sell stuff directly to shopkeepers, because if I want to sell stuff, I then have to go back to my house, drop it in the drop box to sell the next day, as opposed to just being able to sell stuff over the counter while I'm in town, because that's an easier way to get rid of stuff in my inventory, right? So hopefully stuff like that gets added. But yeah, so far so good. They're on a great track with it, and I'm going to keep playing it. Definitely, it's hooked me very, very strongly, and I think it's very, very good. So Fields of Mystery. It's also ridiculously cheap. It's like $11.99, that's like Hollow Knight price. Like it's kind of crazy.
But
how
we'll go
cheap
up
it is.
Probably for 1.0, right?
Yeah, totally. So if you want to get in on it now, then now's the time. But I imagine when this comes to Switch next year, or Switch 2 or whatever, it's going to blow up big time. It's already selling very well, but I think...
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I think people are going to be in love with this when it comes to a Nintendo platform. It speaks to that audience so strongly.
Do you think they can get 1.0 to come out on Switch day one?
I think so, yeah. I think it'll at least be on original Switch. I don't know what Switch 2 deal is going to be.
I'm sure it'll be Switch 2 as well, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I know what you mean.
We'll see. But yeah, that's Fields of Mistria. Very good game. And yeah, check it out if you have the means. But that is going to do us for the first part of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back after the break to talk about that indie direct showcase thing with the partner direct thing, showcase stuff all smashed together into one. See you in a bit. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time to talk about the news. We're so timely, we're so relevant, Bali, as always.
This was a while ago now, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, our episode came out on the Monday, and then this happened on the Tuesday, so it's maybe the most out of date you can possibly be. But as we all know, the TNL curse continues, and Nintendo decides to put their presentations right after we record or release episodes.
True.
And this is no different. So
I mean, we're recording on Thursday, the 5th of September. This episode comes out a few days from now. They're probably going to drop news on the Switch 2 before we've even had a chance to
I guess
get
so.
this episode out. But who knows?
Yeah, there's lots of is it Chris Dring on Twitter who was like, I've been hearing whispers about this month with something happening. So few people are whispering things apparently about Nintendo, and we can
whisper implies low level, right? Like it's not like I don't know. We'll see.
I think like whisper implies someone has heard a thing from somebody who's also heard a thing from somebody who maybe thinks something is going to be announced or talked about this month potentially, which potentially is backed up by the way Nintendo handled this presentation. Well, give me your thoughts, Bally, to begin with, on like when you first heard this is an indie world smashed up with a partner showcase. Did you have opinions on why they would do that? My opinion actually links to what we were just saying about the Switch 2, which is, let's assume Nintendo want to copy a similar blueprint. We were WhatsApping about this earlier, but let's assume Nintendo are copying a similar blueprint to what they did with the Switch 1. So we saw the trailer for the Switch 1 October 2016, and then the Switch 1 launched March 2017, right? Yep. So if they were going for a similar time period, and there's extra interest for March because obviously the financial year, let's assume Switch 2 is launched in March, it is highly likely that the reveal for Switch 2, whatever that might be, I'm still convinced it would be some sort of trailer, would be September, October. So if you have tons of hype going into September, October, and I guess the last big temple that Nintendo have is arguably Zelda, although they have Mario and Luigi later in the year, although that's much lower profile than Zelda. So say they had Zelda, what's that launch date, like 21st 26th? 26th. It's the same day that Balatro Mobile releases, funnily enough.
So say Zelda comes out 26th, and then, I don't know, a week later or a week before, it doesn't necessarily have to be completely clean of Zelda launch, that they might reveal something to do with Switch 2. And because of that, I feel like the energy going into this, I felt was, we've got a whole lot of contracts that we have to fulfill amongst indies and third parties. And we just need to clear our decks, huge clear slate, going into the final quarter or second half of 2024. And I think that the quality of what was announced, Balatro aside, that was a very exciting announcement. the quality of what was announced, I think, was pretty low key. Generally speaking, it was a lot of release dates, a lot of ports. The few interesting new games that there were, most are for next year, and there's just like check-ins on stuff we already knew about. Like, I don't think there was a ton of new stuff, and for me it was quite low key, and I think that was expected because I am convinced that Switch 2 news is coming and they wanted to clear their decks.
Yeah, I think overall I tend to agree with like the reason they did this is a preparational phase, right? It's like, why else would they mash up two of their presentations simultaneously, other than like, I don't know, if they felt there wasn't enough content for individual ones, because they were basically 20 minutes apiece, right?
Even if they did, they might not have felt there was enough time, because it was 40 minutes. They could have done two 20-minute presentations, but if they've got something Switch 2 related coming in September, October, they don't want it coming too close to that, I guess.
Right, and like if it was 20-minute presentations, then they maybe think like, let's just put it up on YouTube and not do a thing with it. But there's some cool stuff here still to announce for a live situation, so I think that probably made sense for why they ended up doing it. And and it feels like it was actually two separate presentations smashed together, because they had different intros and outros for them, and the formatting is different, and the text cards and titling is different. So I do think this is two separate like teams within Nintendo doing two separate presentations. And
maybe
like,
the two different Nintendo teams preparing the presentations didn't even know they were going to be put together until the day before. Yeah,
potentially. That definitely happens within that company. They're so secretive, right? So I wouldn't be surprised.
Japan are just like, now we're going to smash them together just to like.
Yeah. And obviously the Japanese directs are very different as well. And I can talk about that as well as regards what happened. But Bally, was there anything that stood out to you from this presentation?
Let's jump in with your big announcement.
Okay,
let's talk about Balatro. Friends of Jimbo update. Tell me about what you're allowed to say about this. Go.
Yeah, I definitely want to be careful about what I say about any of this. Well, yes, we made a trailer that was in the Nintendo Indie World presentation. It was the first trailer. I didn't know that was going to happen. So it opened the show, which was very cool. We've been doing these kind of making these collaborations happen in the background for a while. Pretty much since February. Around February, a bunch of people were contacting us and were like, hey, we're big fans of the games. People like folks over at CD Projekt Red were like, oh, we really like the game and it'd be cool to do something. And so my colleague Wout, who is out there doing a bunch of talking to people, went and did that, talked to a bunch of people, and got some very cool collaboration artwork for the game, where we basically changed the King, Queen, and Jack cards for different suits to different characters from other franchises. And so Vampire Survivors, Among Us, The Witcher 3, and Dave the Diver, of course, were the first four that we've done. There are more to come. There have been lots of interesting conversations, lots of meetings that have, he's told me about, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why are we talking to them? That's surreal. So there's hopefully some even more cool stuff coming. But yeah, it was a very fun trailer to put together. I kind of oversaw the production of it. So working with our editor to figure out what we want to do, having ideas like. I wrote up a document of what Jokers we should have for each section to thematically tie into each game. So for The Witcher, it was we want to have the castle to tie into Kaer Morhen, the big castle, have the obelisk, which is a big thing in the TV show and the books, and have the troubadour to be the kind of the bardic stuff that Dandelion / Yaskia does, and then one of the screenshots I did has a gold Geralt card, which is a nod to toss a coin to your Witcher. So every single section we basically went through, and I had to think about okay, what should the deck be, what color should the background be. So for The Witcher, Yennefer is associated with lilac. It's a very kind of core part of The Witcher 3, and I was there has to be a purple background in that case, right? So there's a lot. Basically, we put a lot of thought into each individual game and making sure that it thematically fit, and trying to find jokers that would associate with each of them. And fortunately, there's quite a lot in Balatro to pull from in terms of variety of stuff that can thematically work. Our video editor Jess got very addicted to Dave the Diver while editing this trailer, and she just like came up with this idea of Bancho just like slicing all the food jokers, which was really, really cool, and so that got in there. But yeah, lots of fun ideas that everyone put together, and yeah, it came out really well. I'm very, very happy with how that worked out, and yeah, seeing it be in the thing was surreal enough, but the fact it was the first announcement was even wilder. So yeah, that was definitely a career highlight, I have to say. It's definitely a bucket list of all the bucket list things, like being on, like, we had a Game Awards trailer last year and all that sort of stuff with Rise of the Golden Idol. This is probably the top of the list for me, just because of I'm a massive Nintendo fan. I've been doing this for 10 years. We grew up playing Nintendo together, and now a trailer that I worked on and helped produce is leading a Nintendo presentation. It's basically fucking crazy, essentially. So
you've worked on a trailer and a Nintendo presentation, and you didn't have the decency to make sure it didn't clash with our recording.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Like, I knew this date ahead of time. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is gonna mess with our... Not that much ahead of time, though.
Yeah, exactly.
But still. So, yeah, it was a very interesting process. It took, a long time to put together and to plan and everything, and came out really well. So yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it a lot. And now you can enjoy it, too, by downloading it for free from the Nintendo eShop. And play with those cards. So there you go. Balatro Friends of Jimbo. Check it out.
Amazing.
Bally, what else was there? What do you know, aside from the,
a new game in the showcase part that was announced for first quarter next year, I think. I think Morsels looked really interesting. Also interesting, following our publisher conversation last time, it's a Annapurna game.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Interesting. Kind of has... I've heard others kind of compare the vibes a bit to Animal Well, and I kind of agree. Like, it's very strange. It's just obviously a very different art style, but kind of more Zelda-y than Metroidvania-y, I guess. But just a really gross art style that honestly reminds me a bit of oh my god, what's the Nidhogg 2?
Yes. Oh gosh, you're right.
It's actually got a similar art style to that.
Very gross looking. Yeah.
And just I want to know more about this game. I think it could be something cool for starting next year.
Yeah, that one definitely stood out to me. I think it has an arresting visual style. Kind of read a bit more like a top-down roguelike to me, like a bit of Binding of Isaac in there. So I think that might be what's going on with it, but definitely feels like an interesting, different, and not really a game you'd expect Annapurna to publish either, right? If we're talking about the identity of that company, it feels like something a little bit off-piste for them, which is cool. I definitely want to see what's up with that. The other kind of newish game that hadn't been talked about that I was interested in was Moth Cubit, which was almost looked like an RPG where you play as a moth. It had a bit of Undertale Earthboundy energy, a little bit going on there, maybe a bit of Omori, and I did like the visual style that it was going for. It was definitely a kind of top-down pixel art thing. I don't know, it just piqued my interest. I don't think there's much known about it so far, but it definitely was one of the new stuff shown. It was that and Morsels were the two that kind of stood out to me in terms of things we hadn't seen, because I think a lot of both these presentations are games that are being re-released, and I think the ones that are being re-released probably fall on my taste scale a bit more than they do on yours generally.
Right. Well, they normally do, because they're deep JRPG cuts normally.
Yeah, for the most part,
and very anime ones at that. But yeah.
Oh yeah, it depends, but yeah, there's a good range of those, and there was not as many brand new announcements that I think stood out to me as ones that I would be personally taking interest in. So
right.
And a few things that were new but that had already been announced, like Date Everything had already been announced at a previous presentation. That's the game where everything is dateable, like a
really
chair
strange.
And a kitchen sink, and whatever you can think of in a house. It features a cast of 1 billion voice actors. Bunch of voice actors are actually working on it. I think they formed a studio and they started as voice actors, and now they're basically building a game. And
For date everything.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So that's probably how they were able to get every single voice actor on it, is that they already know everybody because they're kind of part of that community, which is very cool. Looks interesting. I feel like there's definitely been games in this space that have done well. Hatful Boyfriend is kind of the original one. That's the one where you date a pigeon. That kind of kicked off this whole thing of like absurdist dating games. I think Dream Daddy is another kind of example of one of those that did quite well, and I'm interested to see this one because it feels like a very unique take on that whole genre. Basically, like completely going over the top with it, right? Going full parody essentially, which I think is quite fun. Anything else for you, Bally, that stood out from this indie stuff?
I think the Sea of Stars DLC is a little bit surprising. I think they maybe did announce they were working on this. I can't remember. I've obviously played Sea of Stars earlier this year. You played it last year when it came out. Both really love that game. This DLC looks really cool, like called Throes of the Watchmaker, and it just seems like there's this either a side world or you go closer into one of the existing worlds, and they've got this kind of new villain, I guess they are, and I don't know what it will entail, but the fact it's free is very cool. This is where I think there's a bit of a weakness with Game Pass, because I would have to resubscribe to Game Pass just to access Sea of Stars, and then I guess because it's free DLC I would have access to it, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you should do, I believe.
But ideally I'll jump back in and play this, and that's spring for next year. But yeah, really, like, I don't think there's DLC for indies maybe often enough, but Sea of Stars, it got so many accolades last year, including it's got indie at the TGAs, so like that's pretty big deal. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was surprised to see it was so kind of story focused. I thought if they were going to do any DLC, it would be more like Challenge Arena or stuff like that, right?
And they have added like co-op, I believe.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's cool.
I think this is going to include a brand new character. So it's like a new location, new story, new character. So that means new like battle mechanics as well, tied to that specific character. And there were 6-7 characters total that you played as in Sea of Stars, I want to say.
Yeah.
So that's pretty significant addition, and I don't know how long this is going to, probably like 5 to 10 hours maybe, which is pretty chunky. So I mean the full Sea of Stars was like 30, right? It was like 35. So I imagine this is going to add a substantial chunk to the game, which is very good to see. And yeah, I'm also interested in jumping back in and seeing how that stuff is, because I mean that game is very, very nice to play. It's a very smooth experience. So interested to see what they bring to it. I definitely think that one of the biggest things people are going to be talking about after this presentation is the surprise drop of Pizza Tower. Pizza Tower is a game that I've talked about a lot on this show, being like, hey, by the way, maybe WarioWare's more significant, or Wario Land's more significant than we think it is in terms of the importance ranking list because of Pizza Tower. Pizza Tower is...
Have you played it yet?
I own it. I've started playing it like 3 times, and every time I'm like, there's so many things to learn. I need to commit. Basically, to play Pizza Tower, you should commit to playing it all the way through and not take any breaks with other games.
Things to learn?
Like, the very beginning of that game, there's like 20 different movement techniques that they teach you, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to forget all this if I don't commit to playing it. So I've started it. I've played that first level maybe 3 separate times, but I've never committed to going forward. So I need to find a space of time and just commit to playing Pizza Tower and learning properly how to play it, which I just haven't done yet, which is a bit silly because, I'm a huge Wario Land fan, and everyone thinks this is one of the best games ever made, so I do think I should probably commit at some point. It's on Switch now, so everyone else can play it, but I've had it sitting on Steam for a long while now, and I mean, this game is seemingly very, very good. A lot of people love it. I personally have never been a big fan of the art style of Pizza Tower. It just is a little off-putting to me personally.
I kind of agree.
And maybe that's the thing that has kind of turned me away from continuing more with it, but I know everyone says it's great, so should probably get around to playing it. And I'm kind of surprised it showed up here. I think the developer said like he didn't want to put it on console or Switch or something at some point, but
really,
Yeah, I don't know why that was, but anyway, turns out they changed their mind, and Pizza Tower is now available.
Nintendo bent his arm.
Probably, yeah. They say, hey, here's some money, and he's like, oh, okay, sure.
Oh, money's good.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
So yeah, Pizza Tower is available for everybody to enjoy, and yeah, it's basically Wario Land and Sonic and a bunch of other things mashed together, speedrunning. It's good. So yeah.
A couple of games that I think both of us are very pumped for, but finally got release dates are the Plucky Squire and Neva. So Plucky Squire is September 17th, and then Neva's October 15th. I'm just wanting those games to come out and to play them.
And they're going to come out, so we will play them both, I believe.
I'd be interested if the Plucky Squire in particular runs well on Switch, because there's a lot of 3D.
I think it will. I feel like that it's been built for Switch from the ground up. Like, I feel like that's the target audience. That's the people they're speaking to the most.
Impact our Game of the Year discussions, of course.
I'm sure it will, yes, I'm sure it will. But I feel like it probably is built with that in mind, and everything I've seen of it feels like it should be okay. So fingers crossed. I think it'll be a very good version there, and yeah. I mean, Neva just looks immaculate. It looks freaking good.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Grease. You're a big fan of Grease. I think that game is very, very well made.
Grease, but with a bit more combat, or combat full stop, I think is interesting. But then the dog, the wolf thing that you're playing with, like...
It feels like it's even more stunning than Grease was, which seems like an achievement in and of itself, and then also more mechanically rich, which is kind of what I wanted out of Grease as well. So... like, yeah, I feel like it's taking the best of both worlds, and seems like it's going to be a very, very good game. I imagine this is going to be highly scored, highly rated. A lot of people are going to like it a lot. The previews seem to be pretty glowing about it, so I definitely want to play that a lot. And a couple other things I think from this presentation that I thought were interesting. Peglin is a good example of a game that has been on PC for years and years and years.
I've heard this name lots of times before.
Yes, it's basically a Peggle roguelike where you play Peggle, the game that you hit pegs and fall down and stuff like that.
Isn't it called something different in Japan? What's it called in Japan?
I don't think it is. I think you're thinking of like maybe Puyo Puyo stuff, maybe, or something along those lines.
No, not Puyo Puyo. What's the classical Japanese thing?
Oh, Pachinko?
Maybe Pachinko? Yeah. I don't know, where you ping the ball. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Pachinko. I guess there is a bit of DNA between Pachinko and Peggle. I mean, Peggle was originally an Xbox 360 game, like an 360 arcade game.
Right.
And it was from PopCap, who did Plants vs. Zombies and all that sort of stuff, right? And Peggle, I think, was a just brain dopamine, like just hit things, lights pop off type of experience. And Peglin basically takes that, puts it into a roguelike, and essentially you're playing Peggle, but with the express purpose of like attacking enemies on the top of the screen. It's kind of like, I guess it's like a bit of Henry Hatsworth, or like a bit of World Ends With You, where you're kind of like doing two things simultaneously. Like although you're not really controlling that much with the top of it. It's like as the balls fall down and hit pegs, then you get attacks being done by your character on the top, essentially. And you're progressing through as you go through a roguelike style map.
Look cool.
It's very cool. I assessed this game 3 years ago and wanted to sign it, and we weren't able to. So it's definitely a game that I think has done very, very well. And has been in early access for literal years. So it's coming to 1.0 and also getting a console release at the same time, which is great. So glad Peglin is out there for more people to check out. It's very cool. And then Power Wash Simulator is getting a Shrek DLC, which I think is maybe the funniest thing that's ever happened in video games.
Shrek 5 got announced recently.
Did it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, they're still making Shrek movies. I feel Shrek is just like one of those things that has become such a meme on the internet that it's like anything Shrek related is instantly going to get some attention. And so, I don't know, this feels like the Power Wash Simulator DLC has been pretty incredible. Like, clear Final Fantasy VII and Tomb Raider makes sense because obviously Square Enix owns those IPs, or at least did own Eidos at a point in time for the Tomb Raider stuff. Shrek just kind of comes out of nowhere where I'm like, I don't know.
You have to tell me when the last Shrek film came out. I'm not talking about the Puss in Boots stuff. I mean the last Shrek film.
Shrek 4?
Yeah, Shrek 4. It's called Shrek Forever After. Well, clearly not
Okay.
Forever After because it's coming back 2026. But when
Right.
was Shrek 4?
I'm going to say 2012.
2010.
Wow, okay.
So
Yeah, it's
14
been
years ago.
a long-ass
Now
time.
we're getting back into Shrek.
He's coming back, I guess.
All these Gen Zers, they don't know what Shrek is.
No, it's true. It's true. They probably only know...
Shrek was like the edgy thing when they were like a baby.
They think Shrek is probably just a meme, basically, at this point in time. Not actually anything else. Yeah, I think the one comment I have here is like, oh boy, Power Wash Simulator looks a bit rough on Switch, doesn't it? You know, like, ooh,
Of course it does.
jeez, oh boy,
We
of
are
course it
due a
does.
Switch 2. Give it to us,
Yeah.
Nintendo, because there are too many games looking rough.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. So yeah, hopefully Nintendo sorts that out. And yeah, a bunch of other stuff in here. Lots of ports of
What
things.
is Shovel of Hope? Shovel Knight.
Oh boy,
I'm
it's
confused. I'm so
basically-
lost by
oh.
Shovel Knight at this point.
Yeah, Shovel of Hope is like the ultimate version of the original campaign of Shovel of Hope, basically. So I don't believe this has the Plague Knight or the Spectre Knight or those campaigns. It's just the core campaign.
Okay.
But you can play as like 100 different characters, and like there's a bunch of cheats they've put in there, and like they've just basically souped up every single aspect of the original campaign.
Right. Okay.
And I believe that's what that is. It's the ultimate version of the original Shovel Knight with all the bells and whistles and everything
Okay.
added.
I'm
which
surprised that wasn't already on Switch. Or anything.
Well, this is all new content. Like
New.
you can play as every single character in the game, like Tinker Knight and all these other bosses and like a bunch of other characters.
Really
Essentially,
juicy. It's still going away with Shovel Knight when what's this? The Zelda like that they're working on?
Mina the Hollower.
Mina the Hollower. That's not got a vague release date.
No,
yet, does it?
So yeah, I know all the stuff about Shovel Knight, Shovel Hope DX because I watched the Yacht Club presentation over the summer. That was one of the summer events. Was the Yacht Club presentation, and unfortunately, they didn't give any release date or anything for Mina during that. They were like, "We're still working on it," and then they were like, "And here's Shovel Hope." But they did end that presentation. I don't know if you caught wind of this news, talking about, we're working on our next project with. For Yacht Club, and Shovel Knight will enter a new dimension. It's very obviously they're working on Shovel Knight 64 or the equivalent, essentially.
3D is tough. Like
it's tough. Yeah,
it's hard. I'd be very impressed if they do a very, very good game with Shovel Knight in 3D. I think that is a lot to bite off, but
it is.
we'll
but I'm sure that they've been working at it for a while, and that will eventually happen. But probably a Switch 2 game, I would imagine, a Shovel Knight 64. So we'll see if that materializes. But yeah, this DX version, I don't think it's for us. I think it's more of Shovel Knight. So if you've never played it, hey, it's cool. Otherwise, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to quadruple dip or whatever it is. Shovel Knight's been on so many platforms at this point. And yeah, I don't think any of these other ones really stood out to me massively. I've not played the Coffee Talk games. I've heard they're good. There's a Tetris thing that I think is a digital clips thing, so I might be more interested in that from a documentary standpoint. And I don't know, talking about games that also look not very good. Goat Simulator 3. Actually, okay, this is more crossing over into the partner direct, I guess. So I guess we transition into that. So yeah, that was the indie stuff.
What's this big bold game that you need to get off your chest?
Right, so this is the partner direct. So here's what happened during this partner direct. They're going along, they're doing presentation, blah blah blah. And actually, here's the context. I didn't really watch most of this direct because obviously, being someone working on a game that's part of a Nintendo Direct, I was doing a lot of stuff in the back. I was actually working during this. It's very weird that my work was to watch this presentation, but like most of it was like flipping switches in the background, making sure stuff on platforms was like working, talking to people at work to make sure everything was going good, and we were putting it out on Twitter and all that old stuff, right?
You're talking about the free update, making sure it's on all the eShops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Just doing back end things, talking to, just communicating with the team, all that sort of stuff. But also just like watching people react to it on Twitter, talking to people on Discord, things like that. So I didn't really watch most of this direct live, the Indie World or the Partner Showcase. I've had to catch up on it afterwards by watching people's reactions because I didn't actually get a good sense of what was happening while it was happening live. And so I was basically had this on like a second screen and was like glancing to it, and I was like, oh, they're starting a montage. And I glance, I'm like, Wait a fucking sec. What are they fucking doing? And they show full 3D models of Joshua and Estelle from Trails in the Sky, the original Trails in the Sky, and I'm like, wait, what? They're doing a remake of, and then it lasts for about 5 seconds and they move on. I'm like, what the fuck? You just announced a remake for Trails in the Sky, like one of the most revered RPG series of all time, with a massive, like, hardcore fan base, and you're putting it into a montage? Like, the disrespect was unreal, I have to say about it.
Is it
was
Super
crazy.
Nintendo originally?
No. So, okay, I've talked about this game already. I've been playing it since like sometime last year. I started it on Steam.
Oh, of course,
so
right. It's the one,
Falcom. Yeah. So this is a Falcom series. Falcom make the Ys games. They make the Legend of Heroes Trails games, basically. And most of them are on PC. Most of them are on Steam. Some of them are on Switch. But it's this massive. It's basically the Wheel of Time of JRPGs, where like there are 12, 15 games, and they're only halfway through the series at this point. And it's like an enormous like narrative that all of it ties together, and it's like really crazy in terms of characters and crossovers and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I'm playing the first game. I'm 18 hours into it, 20 hours into it, having a great time. The music is fucking fantastic. It's like Xenoblade levels of good music, which is a high compliment if you know me. Like the art is definitely old. If you look up if you look up Trails in the Sky, the first game, it is like an isometric perspective. I wouldn't say ugly looking, but like it is very much of a time and of a place and of an era. And there is not an easy way to play this game in modern times. It's basically buy it on Steam and play it on a Steam Deck if you want it conveniently. Otherwise, just play it on PC or PSP, which is not easy for people to play on. And so it's kind of been stranded here for a while. And a lot of people are like, how do I start with this series? Where do I hop on? And so there are a couple of entry points. James Jones recently has talked about Trails to Azure and Trails... what's the other one in that? It's the Crossbell duology. I can't remember the second one, but he's talked about both of those games on RFN recently and is very, evangelical about them. And a lot of people are evangelical about this series generally. But you can start with the Crossbell series if you want, even though it kind of happens partway through or like adjacent to the Trails in the Sky. Or you can start with original Trails in the Sky, which, like I said, is hard to get access to. Or you can start with the Cold Steel series, which are like more modern iterations of it. And those are on more modern platforms like PlayStation and stuff like that. And so the only games on Switch are the Crossbell duology and also Cold Steel 3. So like they put the third game in the third sub-series of this series on Switch. Like that was a good place for anybody to start. It was like putting Mass Effect 3 on Wii U. Like who the fuck is going to start there, right? So basically they haven't been available easily accessibly in a way for most people to play. And so that's why this is such a big deal, because this is a full-blown remake of the original Trails in the Sky game, which basically gives everybody who is even slightly curious about the series a easy ramp into it, an easy on point to jump in and say, I'm going to start here. It's like when Sega did Yakuza 0. It's like, okay, you're intimidated by all these games. How do we get new people in? Here's a starting point for you. And what Falcom have done is they've gone back and they've fully done a 3D remake of the original game. And as someone who only started playing this last year and has played like, a third of it maybe is the way
You're
how
now
far
going
through
to
I am.
stop and wait for the remake.
Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I do want to finish the original because it feels like it's going to be quite different mechanically and stuff like that. But it's really striking to me how I look at, shots from this remake already, and I'm weirdly nostalgic about it. Like, I see that first town that you walk through, and I'm like, wow, they've done an amazing job of, like, recreating this in full 3D, essentially. Like, just the vibes, the feelings, it's all very much on point. If you watch the Japanese Direct, you get much more respect is put on this game's name. There's like a full 1 minute trailer. Whereas North America and Europe, they're like, oh, nobody knows what this is, so we're just going to put it in a montage. Meanwhile, me and everybody else out there is screaming like, Nintendo, what are you doing? Like, this would have been a big announcement for a portion of the fan base who would have shouted loudly and are shouting loudly about it online right now. But I think they're a bit annoyed because they've kind of relegated it to a montage. So that's a bit of a shame. But the fact that it exists, like, my colleague at work messaged me like while it was happening. He's like, "Did they just put Trails in a montage?" And we were both like flabbergasted by it. So that was yeah, it was very interesting that they decided to do that. But I'm very glad. I was watching a bunch of reactions from Trails fans, because Trails fans are on YouTube and evangelizing it nonstop to everybody they can, and they were going pretty crazy. So that's great. Yeah, it's a very cool series, and obviously it's very intimidating, but that's the kind of thing I like, you know? I saw the Yakuza games, and I was like, that's a challenge, I will take that, and this is exactly what I'm doing with Trails as well, is I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm going to play every single one of these. It might take me 10 years, it might take me 3,000 hours, but I'll do it, because I'm the guy who read The Wheel of Time as a fun thing to do during COVID, you know? I like long-running narratives that require a lot of effort and time and work to get into. That's my vibe, so... Yep, and now that can be everybody else's vibe too, because they've given you an easy point to jump in.
So we have long time and effort to get into. Does that apply to Suikoden and these other games you've highlighted?
Maybe. Not necessarily. I think Suikoden is like, obviously, so the original Suikoden was a PlayStation 1 RPG. 1 and 2 are the two games that a lot of people... kind of are nostalgic for and are seen as the best games in the series. The creator for Suikoden recently passed away. He was working on Ayuden Chronicles that recently came out. Didn't review very well. Seems like that was a Kickstarter game, and a lot of people had a lot of hope for it. And it seems like it didn't turn out exactly what people wanted. It didn't really have the things that people liked about the original, which is a shame. But it seems like Konami are going back and saying, hey, let's do some remasters for some of these old games. And Suikoden 1 and 2, they've been working on for a long time. It's been announced for like a couple of years now, and people are waiting for any news. And it seems like it's still going to be a while. It's 2025 is what they said for a release date for this. So it's going to come out eventually. But I definitely want to jump on with these. I have both Suikoden 1 and 2 on my Anbernic as well as on my Steam Deck through emulation, because I've been meaning to play them for a while. They are very revered classic PS1 RPGs, and they're the kind of PS1 RPGs where they are still using sprite art as opposed to going full 3D and stuff like Final Fantasy VII did. So definitely unique in that sense, but I would like to play one of them at some point. I think 2 is the one most people like the most, but if they're going to remaster both, I'd probably play both anyway. So that definitely was one that I was very interested to hear a bit more about, but it feels like it's still quite far away, so it'll be a little bit of time until that happens. Yeah, I mean, Dragon Quest 3, we got a release date for... I think did we already have a release date for that, or did they give us a specific date in this presentation?
I cannot remember for the life of me, actually. But
it's November, though, right? It's like November 14th or something like that?
It is November 14th this year, which is very exciting. Very much looking forward to that. I
think it might be the same day, around the same time as Mario and Luigi as well.
Right,
so...
yes.
Yeah, lots of things coming out in close proximity. Like, I feel like between everything in September that we've already talked about, Neva and Metaphor in October, that's probably going to take my whole October as Metaphor.
You're so screwed. Metaphor is going to be so long.
Yeah, it's at least 70 hours, like minimum. And then Dragon Quest and Mario and Luigi in November. Like, I'm pretty good for new games for the rest of this year, I think, for stuff I want to play. So... yeah, nobody announce anything else, please. Thank you. That would be nice.
But the September trilogy of Astrobot, Plucky Squire, and Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom is just immaculate. Like that has a very strong chance of being my top 3 games of the year.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it totally could.
Which is exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good year ahead. Like, I think the middle of this year, a lot of people were a little bit back and forth of like, oh, is there much happening? If you're someone who's interested in a lot of different games, there's so many cool things coming out. So.
I don't even think you have to have that much broad appeal to still have just so many games coming out. And then the second you're into like quite a few different genres, which I think broadly we are, especially you. There's just tons, isn't there?
There's tons. There's so much, which is great. The other really major thing from this presentation for me and for a lot of people, they're finally putting the DS Castlevania games out there as a trilogy. So obviously we talked about before how Symphony of the Night is somehow still not on Switch, and it still isn't, but every other Castlevania game is. And yeah, this means that every single Metroidvania-style Castlevania, except for Symphony of the Night, is now on Switch, which is just silly at this point in time. It's like, what are you doing? I don't understand why. Like, why did they do that entire re-release and then put it only on PlayStation? Very baffling. But in any case, the Dominus collection, which they got close to DS. Dominus, it starts with a D, ends with an S. So trying to do the whole DS thing that everyone did back then. In fact, it was only the first Castlevania game on DS that tried to do that, which was Dawn of Sorrow. But obviously we know of many other things, like Dual Strike was one, and a bunch of other games had the DS moniker, which was a fun tradition that people did back in the DS days. But yeah, these 3 games are very good. I am of the opinion that I'd say my favorite is Portrait of Ruin, probably, of the 3. Portrait of Ruin is probably my favorite of all of those. If we were to take the GBA and DS ones all put together, I'd say it goes Portrait of Ruin, then Aria of Sorrow, then Dawn of Sorrow, and then Harmony of Dissonance, Circle of the Moon, and Order of Ecclesia. I am a little bit contrarian. A lot of people love Order of Ecclesia. I think it's one of the worst Castlevania. I think it's the worst one of these 6 games, in fact. It's very linear. It's very grindy, like extremely grindy and challenging and difficult in a way that's not very fun and doesn't have a lot of the exploration that I seek in a Castlevania game. And Portrait of Ruin does have that kind of similarly split up thing where it's multiple maps, but at least Portrait of Ruin has like a core exploration loop to it. Order of Ecclesia is basically just running across flat plains, and I just find it so uninteresting as a game. So that's my hot take. Order of Ecclesia is probably my least favorite of all of those games. But Dawn of Sorrow is excellent, and it seems like they've got around the touchscreen stuff by making it kind of QTEs this time instead. So if you're playing on the TV, you're going to not have to interact with it in a touchscreen sense, and you can do all of those inputs by just pressing buttons, which is good. And they've made it kind of, honestly, it kind of looks like the setup that I showed you on Emulation Station for DS games on Steam Deck, where the big screen is on the left and is big, and the small touchscreen is on the right and is small. Cool, yeah. So they've basically done that, and that's kind of how they've got around it, which makes sense, because a lot of these are just like the map is on the bottom screen, and the top screen is where all the action is happening. So that probably makes a lot of sense to do it that way. But yeah, it's 3 solid games, and it's great that you now have all of those Castlevania games available to play on Switch, which is pretty great. So finally they did it. And yeah, and then I think other things that I was interested in, it was cool to see more fighting game people react to yet another fighting game collection from Capcom. This is different from the previous one, the Marvel one, which when I first saw this, I was like, oh, they're just announcing more Marvel, like a release date for the Marvel collection. No, they're doing another fighting collection, which includes a bunch of games that people love, including the Capcom versus SNK games, as well as some Dreamcast bangers in Power Stone and Power Stone 2, which are games that a lot of people love. We talk about like Dreamcast games that people talk about, the Power Stone games, the ones people go crazy over, as well as a couple of other ones there. I think Project Justice is a Rival Schools game that people were pretty pleased with. So I saw a lot of reactions of people freaking out about this Capcom collection. Fighting game fans are eating good these days, which is very nice to see, and I'm glad that they are happy. And I just wanted to call out My Sims, because I played My Sims.
What a weird announcement.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I mean, My Sims was on the Wii. I played a lot of My Sims. It's the only Sims game I've played. It's not really a Sims game. It's more of an Animal Crossing at the end of the day, I want to say. So, but it gave me an excuse to once again post the picture of my Ho-Oh fridge that I made.
It's from 2008.
Yeah. So I have this photo of this Ho-Oh fridge that I took with my digital camera from back then, and I've somehow managed to keep track of it on the internet, because through Twitter, I just searched for, like, because I knew I posted on Twitter a few years ago, so I just searched on my Twitter, Ho-Oh fridge, I think, and I found the picture and I reposted it once again. So you can go to my Twitter and see my amazing Ho-Oh fridge that I made.
I could not tell you anything about that game other than your Ho-Oh fridge. That's all I can remember.
It's pretty much like an Animal Crossing, like I said. Like, you would go around the town, you would do tasks for villagers, you would build your house up. And
did you enjoy it?
I did. I really liked My Sims, yeah. I mean, I was quite young when I played it, and I don't know, hadn't had much experience with that genre generally, so... But, like, I liked the customization aspect of it. I liked, like I said, making a Ho-Oh fridge and just customizing stuff, so... it was good for that. I think it had good tools for you to mess around with and build things, so... definitely a nice addition to the Switch library, right here in the dying embers of its life. And then the very last thing I want to talk about is the thing that Sega said they would never do. So a couple of years ago, Sega and RGG, Ryuga Gotoku Studio, the Yakuza / Like a Dragon team, they were like, oh, no, the Nintendo Switch, that's for children and for families. How could we ever put a Yakuza game on that system? That's basically their thing. They had this entire interview.
Before it sold as many units as it has now?
No, I mean, that was only 2 years ago, so the Switch was already doing 100 million units by that point, right? But like they did this interview, and everyone's like, the fuck are you talking about? Like it's like such a stupid excuse for like not putting these games on there.
It's for babies.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, oh no, but I think our game is too mature for that audience. And I'm like, guys, come on. Like, we've got Doom on here, all right? I think there's plenty of possibility for you to put your games. And so finally they've relented, and they're putting the first Yakuza, the remake of the first one, Kiwami, onto the Switch. So there you go. Slowly, Bally, I'm losing the things I'm going to put on our Nintendo list for the future. They're all just coming to Switch, and yeah, that's it. It's over now.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to start making room for every Yakuza game in our top 50 from now on, I guess. It's the way it's going to be. So, but yeah, I'm glad that actually finally happened, because it's been a long time coming, and like, those games could easily run on Switch because they are a previous generation's engine. Like, it's basically the engine they used for Yakuza 5 on the PS3. So like, it is in line with that technology. Like, both Zero,
probably the start of them porting the bunch to Switch too, right? Like, that's just the start of that.
I hope so, because the Dragon engine, so the more modern games are made on the Dragon engine, which is their internal engine that is much more modern, and it's like, there's a stark difference when you play Judgment versus Kiwami, because I played Kiwami and then I went straight to Judgment, and like, the difference in like, when you walk into a building in Kiwami, it's a loading screen. When you walk into a building in Judgment, it just seamlessly walks inside, right? It's one of those differences. And so yeah, these older games, Kiwami and Zero, built on the older engine, I think both of those could work very well. But Kiwami 2 was built on the Dragon engine, so I don't think that's going to get ported to original Switch. I think you'd have to wait for a new piece of hardware to do that if they were going to. And hopefully they will, but we'll see. So, anyway, I think that was pretty much most of it. I think a lot of this other stuff is like, feels like very contractually obligated. Like, okay, Star Wars Hunters. Like, does anyone care about that? I don't think so. Update for Disney's Moonlight Valley. I guess I'm kind of interested in playing Epic Mickey, the remaster of Epic Mickey. I'm kind of interested in that. But like Funko Fusion again, can we just forget that exists, maybe, please? A couple of other RPG things, a new Rune Factory and a new Atelier game. They make Atelier games like they're fucking, I don't know, like a butter factory. I don't know, good analogy. They're just putting them out. They just come out every day. They're printing them. They're printing like the papers. So it's a new one of those.
Printing money.
Like printing money, of course. But I don't know if they do print money. I know that people buy them, but still. Yeah, it was an interesting. I think I watched Min-Max's reaction, and they were commenting on like the posing of the character, and then it cuts to the title screen, and it's basically like her ass just like front facing, is like the legs, like the pose they chose for that thing. I was like, Jesus Christ, guys. So that was interesting. And Worms Armageddon. A shout out to Worms Armageddon, the only Worms game I've ever played. We played it a bunch on my PS1 back in the day. And they're remastering.
I was so bad at it when we played on PS1.
It's a hard game.
It's hard.
Very challenging.
It's like bouncing grenades about, and they'd always bounce in the wrong bloody places. Oh,
yeah. Just like SteamWorld Heist 2. And there you go. That's wrapped us all around back to the beginning of this podcast. So yeah. I don't know, Bally, final thoughts on this presentation? I know there wasn't a lot in there for you, but...
a few things in the indie that was interesting, and very little that I was personally interested in the third-party stuff. But yeah, like I said, feels like there's a wave of news coming that is Switch 2 related. But
there are rumbles in the jungle.
Rumors. Whispers, they say.
Rumors. Whispers abound. Many things happening, potentially.
Like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The Whispers.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that could be cool. Cool. Well, that's going to do us for this show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can obviously find us in various places across the internet And one of those places is patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can support the show and you can get bonus episodes and fun things like that. And Bally, we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, we have 2 brand new patrons. They are Liger Woods and Bobbery. Thank you both for your brand new patronage. But we'd also like to thank our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer, UK Alan, Turtle, Orange Thunder, and Ali T. Thank you all for your support. But thank you to all of our patrons. We really, really, really appreciate all the support you give this show. And another shout out to our August episode of ThisNintendoLife. We reached episode 50 and we did our top 50 non-Tendo games of all time. It's definitely worth checking out, and you can listen for $1.
Absolutely. So go ahead and do that. You can obviously find us in various places across the internet. I am on social media at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. I'm getting tired, and I am on Twitter, and I've been using a bit more Blue Sky recently, MBZ. I've not seen you on there as much.
No, I haven't. I'm mainly on Threads as opposed to Blue Sky, but I should probably have a look. The problem is having 3 fucking platforms, man. I don't like this life, you know? I need everyone to commit to one. It's
just temporary. Some of them will die.
They say that. They said that. We're still here. We're still here.
Twitter is... It's going to take a long time for people to change habits, but we'll get there.
See. I'm sure. Good stuff. You can find the podcast at TNL Podcast. Go there for updates about things, as well as links to our YouTube channel if you want to watch there instead of listen. And you can also go to the Discord and meet some fun people who are chatting about video games on a regular basis. You can obviously find the show in various places across the internet, such as Spotify, such as Stitcher. Download us, review us, rate us. That is always the best thing possible. If you like it, tell a friend. That's a good thing to do as well. Get some word of mouth out there. That's what we're doing. We're here and we're making podcasts, and you can listen to them. And I think that is pretty much
I've refreshed
it.
my Amazon page with
what does it say?
Astrobot about 4 times just to listen while we've been recording, and it's still at dispatched. I've not got any estimates for when it will be delivered tomorrow, but I'm looking forward to that, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll maybe we should talk about that on the main show as well, because that feels like a Nintendo game. But we'll figure out.
I've got a good solution to that question, but I'll mention it off mic.
All right. That will be happening, I'm sure, and we'll be playing a bunch of it and a bunch of other games, because it's a stacked month. Things are happening, and who knows? Maybe we'll talk about a video game system that Nintendo will release in the future at some point in the next couple of episodes, if they decide to say anything.
Might be next
at all.
episode.
Who knows? It will probably be announced the day after we release one. So just put your thinking caps out there.
Everyone, mark your calendars. That's when the trailer will drop for this.
It will indeed. But until then, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more podcasting and video games and such. Until then, goodbye.